From the beginning.
No, you calm down. Not yet. Okay. And a 1, and a 2, and a 3.
From the beginning.
And I was shown that that Lucifer would return, that the UN and the Vatican were going to be completely behind it, again, under false pretenses. He's going to show up and say, I'm here to save the day, right? And, okay, fine, you know.
Yeah, of course,
ahead,
you can say whatever you want.
But
I've always hated censorship. It's the internet.
Sometimes, you know, once they get you for your first love bite, well, it depends on how aware you are, right?
I forgot my bullets. I never had a gun. Here I am left standing. Am I the only one? For what I see, memories have guilted me. I'll never see the sun.
First of all, as you know, the Anunnaki and the Draco are enemies. Second of all, underneath Baghdad was a stargate that was created by the Anunnaki so that they could transfer from Jupiter to the Earth.
I'll never see the sun. I could just end it all, but the demons will have won.
Magical practitioners that, you know, some are good and some use their magic for good and to heal and to help, and others do use it for evil. And, you know, in some cases, you know, people really were.
This is too much sometimes.
From the broken ruins of Babylon.
This is End of Days Radio. I am your host, Daniel, broadcasting all the way to you from the shimmering Emerald City right here in the heart of the Pacific Northwest. Today's date is April 4th, 2018. Today's guest is Gary Wayne. Gary Wayne, author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Mankind, details the role of modern-day Nephilim in Satan's plan to install the Antichrist at the end of days. Did you hear that, everybody? The end of days. The end of days. Gary Wayne is a Christian contrarian who has maintained a lifelong love affair with biblical prophecy, history, and mythology. His extensive study has encompassed the Bible and Gnostic scriptures, the Qur'an, the Bhagavad Gita, nailed that one, Gilgamesh and other ancient epics, language, etymology, and secret society publications. Why? Oh my, how positively gangster this evening. I like it. Remember that to get all information on End of Days Radio, go to endofdaysradio.com. You can do everything there. You can contact me. You can look at our schedule of upcoming guests. You can join the forum and chat. You can chat in the chat room. You can donate the show if you feel so inclined. Just click that PayPal donate button. Donate button. Just click that donut button and a donut will appear just for you. And if you're lucky, it'll be one of those white ones with the sugary powder and the raspberry inside. And remember to stay tuned after the break. We'll still have some show to do. For some listeners and fans out there, that's their favorite part. So stay tuned. We have plenty more to talk about after the guest. But enough of this. Enough of this nonsense. enough. Let's go ahead and contact today's guest. We have much to talk about. Hello?
Hello.
Gary, is this you?
It is. Glad we're on the air right now. Glad to be on.
Yeah, absolutely. We are live. Gary, welcome to End of Days Radio.
Yes, excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation tonight. I think what we're going to talk about should raise some curiosity with the audience.
Absolutely. One thing I like to do, just starting off, is to just see what you've been up to. How has life been going for you? Anything new?
Well, no, I wouldn't say anything that's absolutely brand new. I'm very, very busy promoting my book, so that keeps me, all my spare time busy, and I'm very, very active on Facebook. And so, no, nothing really new, just sort of doing the same old thing.
Cool. Let's go ahead and go back to the very beginning. Gary, where are you originally from, and what was it like growing up there?
Well, I'm originally from northern Saskatchewan. And so people who are listening may be familiar with the province, but maybe not the area. So it is, the town I grew up in is called Prince Albert, and it is about an hour and a half north of Saskatoon. It gets freezingly cold there. 40 below is not uncommon. And they've had a fairly cold winter there. I've moved out when I was 18, so and now I live on the west coast in the Vancouver area in BC, Canada. So very much more temperate out here. It's much more like the Seattle weather.
Were you into hockey at all growing up?
Well, when you live in small town Saskatchewan, you basically, for sure, there's going to be three things in a town. One's going to be a church, one's going to be a curling rink, and one's going to be a hockey rink. So, and the fourth thing would be a grain elevator at that time. So, yes, very much into hockey.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I've heard that hockey is pretty much equivalent to football down here.
Yeah, maybe more so up here. It is the national sport, and it is the national pride, so it carries a lot of the culture in Canada, no doubt about it.
And were you raised with Christianity in your life?
I was raised a Baptist, but, as most people, when you get into school, into high school, and you sort of walk away from your traditional roots and your traditional beliefs, and you get educated in things that are not about the Bible. But after a while, I started to ask hard questions about science and ask hard questions about some of the different research techniques and the theories. And, I found it, you have to have more faith in science than you do in religion. And so I slowly made my way back, and actually came back to being a Christian and believing in God and Jesus and searching out the Bible through a author of the 70s who my brother challenged me to read one of his books if I had the courage to do so. And that was an author by the name of Hal Lindsey, who wrote The Late Great Planet Earth. And so that book really scared the socks off of me, and I wanted to verify the accuracy and the veracity of what he was saying, and that sort of led me back into the Bible and down into my research path that led to this book. And I'm a prophecy buff by my biggest passion, but I'm also a mythology buff, and I'm also a history fan. So, when I wrote the book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, I was able to put all of this together.
Awesome. I've heard of Hal Lindsey. I know he's a pretty respected author.
Yeah, he was one of the cutting-edge authors, and he wrote many, many books. But Late Great was probably his most successful book. And he actually is still doing some broadcasts even today. I think he has a weekly show that's on some channels. So he's still alive, and he had a big impact on me.
Oh boy, he must be in his 80s by now?
He's not a spring chicken, that's for sure.
Oh wow, well props to him for keeping it going at an elder age. Wow.
Yeah.
And this period where you became kind of disassociated with Christianity, it sounds very interesting. It sounds like you became very interested in science. Did you become an outright atheist at that point?
Yeah, pretty much. I was pretty much bought into evolution and pretty much bought into, the Bible was not fact and it was just, another sort of set of writings. And so it's amazing how easily that, if you're not totally sound and active, how easily you can be misled, especially when you're young. But again, it was more my questioning what they were really saying and what they really didn't know, and all the sort of things that they guess at, that, and all of the things that, that they don't consider because they're very much an agenda-oriented belief system. And so I was prime again to sort of be encouraged to come back to believing in the Bible. It was not that big of leap at the point where I was really doubting, do these guys really know what they're talking about?
Was there a moment where we know you came back to religion and we kind of know how that happened, but was there a moment when you realized that maybe things were a little bit different than even what you might find in the Bible? Because it seems like at some point you realized that there's actually real life giants that existed on the earth.
Yeah, and again, it comes at it through the influence of Hal Lindsey. So what I did was I wanted to verify all of the prophecies in the Bible and track them. So I went through the Bible, I don't know how many times, and rereading. And as I was reading, I would write down and catalog into different files all the different prophecy narratives. So, and then as I was doing it, I was also cataloging other important things of interest to me in terms of doctrine and things like that. And when you do that sort of, diagnostic approach to the Bible, which takes a long time, you tend to look at every verse rather closely. And the odd thing that just kept coming up beginning in Genesis 6 was the giants. And, if it was just one sort of out of place verse, at the beginning of the flood narrative, and you didn't really hear about it or any implications of them thereafter, you'd say, well, that's just very weird. And it is a very odd, strange, bizarre set of verses, 6:1 to 6:4 in Genesis, but they just kept coming up. And I kept recognizing that these were all talking about the same people. And as I went through further into the Bible and into the Exodus, they pop up again. And then when you get into prophecy and into Revelation, you get some hints at there's a connection back to the days of Noah. There's a connection back through demons to the giants. There's a connection back to the fallen angels. You've got Jesus going into the abyss when he's in the grave to talk to these spirits, and you've got Jude talking about the crimes of these angels that were sexual in nature. And so that led me to say, okay, I've got all of this stuff that's cataloged, and I want to write a book. I'd like to publish some prophecy books. So I think what I'm going to do my plan was I'll write a short book, and I'll somehow write a book and see whether I can get published, and I'll do it about trying to connect the giants of Genesis 6 to end-time prophecy. But somewhere along sort of the road to the Colosseum, I got sidetracked and down all these different rabbit holes. And it's probably going to be the longest book I ever write. And certainly I know that from a selling and a publishing challenge in terms of getting published, you don't want to write huge books because it's a costly project. So, and how those rabbit holes opened up is starting to marry up my other passions that I mentioned earlier with history and with mythology. And then I added the next leg was why don't I read in other religions out of their holy books what they might have to say about prehistory? And that just led me into a whole bunch of different rabbit holes. And as you're going down those rabbit holes, all of a sudden you run right into this secret society aspect that is deeply connected all throughout history. And even today, with all of these different concepts that are associated with fallen angels and the giants of Genesis 6.
So it seems like you're not somebody who is unwilling to look at other cultures and other religious texts.
No, I'm quite open to it. But my advice, if there's Christians out there that are listening that are concerned about reading other scriptures, is you need to be very, very well versed in scripture, because some of what they write can be very, very sort of seductive and make a lot of sense. Except that there's always things that are missing. There's always nothing at the end, and it's not complete. It doesn't hit you the same way Scripture does. It doesn't grab you sort of the same way, but you can be sort of misled. So you need to be able to measure everything that it says in other accounts, whether it's mythology or legend or religion, and take it back to the Bible and say, does the Bible say that, or has that gone awry in a certain way, and that you're able to recognize that. But if you can do that, you are able to get a significant amount of context and meaning that you may not have had before if your interest is in prophecy or if your interest is in prehistory or in history.
Okay, I know that there's a part in the Bible where they talk about the Anakim, and I know about the part with David and Goliath. Are there any other passages from the Bible that you might be able to share with my listeners out there that talk about giants?
Oh, sure. So there's many names of giants that come after the flood in the Bible. And Anakim is one of them, and that comes up in Numbers 21. And it says that they're the descendants of giants in the King James Version Bible, but in other Bibles it'll say they're the descendants of Nephilim. And that's because giants, when you take that word back to Hebrew, it's going to go back to Nephil or the Nephilim ones. So Anakim are descendants of Nephilim. But they're also said to be, in the book of Deuteronomy, part of a classification called the Rephaim. And the Rephaim, incidentally, is the lineage that, if you take the word giant back when it's used in relationship with Goliath, goes back to Rapha or Rephaim. So he's definitely of the same bloodline. You've got other names of tribes that are in the Bible. So you've got not just the Rephaim and the Anakim and the Nephilim that were before the flood, but and the Rephaim and the Anakim are also after the flood. But you've got names like Horim, Amalekim, you've got Abim, you've got Emin, you've got Zamzuzim, you've got Horim, and more. So there's a lot of different tribes of giants recorded in the Bible that do not go back to what is known as the Table of Nations in the Bible, which is in 1 Chronicles and Genesis, and that's all of the descendants that form the nations of the world, descending from Noah and the three sons. So they come out of nowhere, and there's no explanation for them. And one of the most famous ones, other than Goliath, who's named in the Bible, is named Og. And Og is one of the kings of the Amorites that's east of the Jordan River at the time of the Exodus. And he's considered in Deuteronomy and in Joshua as the last survivor, the remnant of the Rephaim. So he's Rephaim, and he's considered the last of them. But that can't be quite accurate if, in terms of that, there are no more giants after that, because when Israel crosses the Jordan, they're fighting the Anakim, they're fighting all these different Rephaim, and as I mentioned, 400 years later, you've got Goliath, who's a Rephaim, and there's more than one Rephaim that's amongst the Goliath at that time. In fact, there's several that David will run down and hit, and kings were the ones who were ruling the 5 city-state of Philistia at that time, and they were the Abim, as they were known in terms of a branch of the Rephaim. And he had a brother named Sihon that's also killed by Moses in Israel at that time. And then you've got Rapha, who is obviously the procreator of the Rephaim line. That is another giant. You've got Arba, who's the father of the Anak. You've got Talmai. You've got I'm trying to think of a couple other names, but anyways, you get the idea that there's a lot more things going on in Genesis and the Old Testament with giants than first meets the eye.
So David had to deal with more than just Goliath, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Poor guy.
There is at least 5 famous ones that were listed, but if you read the battles of David and his mighty men, like they're killing these giants all of the time in the Philistines. I mean, there's many of them that they had not run out at the time of the Exodus. And that's one of the covenants of David, is to finish the job of running out the giants from the covenant land and surrounding area. And he is crowned king, first for Judah, second for Israel, because there's 2 nations at that time, at a place called Kiriath Arba, which is named after Arba because he's the father of the Anakim. And Kiriath Arba is the sort of the home city for the giants, just as Scythopolis, or Bethshean, as it was known, or Bethshean and Bethshe in other transliterations, that is a little bit further north of where Kiriath Arba was another famous city of giants that descended down from Scythia, that lasted even to the time of Josephus. It was called Scythopolis. And so the name of that town today is called Hebron. So this is a very, very big impact that the giants had on the post-Diluvian world and the Antediluvian world, and that there were significant numbers of giants that were not just sort of hanging about, but these giants usurped the kingships after the flood, just as they had done before the flood. So when you get your royal dynasty starting to come down through history, these are the bloodlines of these original giants. So not all of them were wiped out by David and his fighting men. And at the time when David meets Goliath, he picks up 5 flat stones. And if God was with him that day, he probably wouldn't need 5 stones, because there was only one warrior on the field. What he was concerned about was he had 4 other brothers that were kings of the other city-states that were all there. And there was more giants within the army, but he wanted to make sure that if he killed Goliath, which he did, that he would have enough stones to kill the other giants that were there.
What's one thing that I found interesting, about half a year ago, I was bumbling around Google and YouTube, and I learned about this Roman emperor named Maximus Thraxus, and I guess he was like 8'6" or something like that, just incredibly tall, like inhumanly tall. I have to wonder if he's one of them. Yeah,
well, and the Romans recorded many giants, so not just a few. I mean, these giants were around at the time of the Romans, and the Thracians would be, were most of those giants in the Romans' times that they had recorded. But that wouldn't be considered a huge giant. And a lot of people think that the word giant means in the Bible, somebody that's 7 feet tall at that time, or maybe 8 feet tall. And a lot of people say, Goliath was only 8 feet tall. But if you take the cubits, even on a common cubit, and I would argue you need to use the royal cubit, which is 21 inches versus the 18 inches of the common cubit, because he was a king, that if you extrapolate his 6 cubits and a span, as I recall is the measurement that's provided in the Bible, that would make him close to 10 feet tall and closer to 11 feet tall in terms of a royal cubit. And Og's bed would have been 14 feet or 15 feet, so he would have been 12 or 13 feet tall. And in the book of Numbers, when it talks about the Anakim, it says that the Israelites looked like grasshoppers or insects by comparison. And then in Amos, it talks about, the Amorites who weren't purebred giants. They intermarried with the Rephaim, and these are some of the people that Sihon and Og were leading. said that they were as tall as the cedars of Lebanon. And it's a bit of an allegory or an embellishment to say that, because the cedars that were in Lebanon were used to build all the ancient structures of the ancient world, and they were, 40 to 50 feet tall. So I think that's probably a little bit outside the norm, but it's the comparison that you need to remember. But from the original Nephilim, a lot of the researchers in the genre will say that these giants were 20 to 40 feet tall. So maybe there was some of them that were still that tall at the time of the Amorites, but I think that would probably fit better with a size that goes back into the Antediluvian epoch. But we get newspaper articles in North America between 1850 and, say, 1950 of discovering these giants, some as big as 18 feet tall. Lots that are 12, 14 feet tall, lots that are 10 or 12. And it's amazing how many giant bones were discovered, at least according to newspaper articles recorded. And I have a connection. If people want to get a hold of me, I'll send you this website to these old newspaper stories if they want to verify some of that. So these were huge beings, but they just weren't like these sort of tall, gangly monsters. Monsters, yes, but they were extraordinarily fleet of foot and dexterous, just as the Titans were described as. I mean, fabulous warriors, men of renown. And so not only strong, but they were stocky and muscular. So where the average height to width ratio of a human is generally thought to be about 3 to 1, whereas these giants were recorded as 2 to 1. So incredibly wide, incredibly fleet of foot. They had face like vipers, and their eyes glowed. They had high cheekbones, protruding chins, and elongated skulls, and some depictions have them with longer necks, just as Anakim can mean in one of its meanings, long-necked. So these were extraordinarily large, powerful, warrior-type beings that were easily able to dominate humans that were, a third their size or half their size. You pick the size that you want for the average and at what period of time, but they were complete monsters compared to humans.
Could some dinosaur bones actually be giant bones?
That's a good question. I don't think so. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are not necessarily like a Tyrannosaurus Rex type of bones being misconstrued, but they've got like mastodon bones that they're classified as mastodon bones that don't really fit, that would be in that area for the size of some of these giants. So there is a case for that, and in my book I cite a couple of those examples. So I think that's certainly a possibility that some of the bones have been misconstrued, but I wouldn't want to go too far down that path.
Yeah, certainly. I do remember seeing a movie that was very popular years ago called 300, and the leader of the opposing side, I think they were the Persians, they were attacking the Greeks and the, the good guys, the Spartans, and their leader was a giant. Kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, king of Persia, right? And as I mentioned, they usurped the kingships. And so all that they're doing in that story of the 300 in the movie that you're referring to is just sort of depicting what mythology would say, even though secular history doesn't want to admit it, that this was a descendant of the giants. And he may have even had some extra size, at that point in time in history, because as we've talked about, there is proof that the giants were actually taller. And if you look at how, whether it's Egyptian kings or Mesopotamian kings, as you go back into, not that far into prehistory, but if you sort of get before, say 300 BC or so, you get lots of depictions where the kings are significantly bigger than the subjects. Now, typically how that's rationalized is well, that's just to inflate the ego and make them godlike and part of their imagination, part of their mythology. I don't think they did that. I think they recorded it exactly how they saw it. And, another thing to look at in terms of how they looked and the size of them and some of the elongated skulls, if you ever get a chance to go to a King Tut museum. Now, he's the son of a pharaoh called Akhenaten. And typically you're going to have an Akhenaten statue in a King Tut exhibit. And if you look at him, he's got that elongated skull I'm talking about. And a lot of times he's got a cap to cover his head. But he's got those high cheekbones. He's got those big eyes that sort of wrap around a little bit and are slanted as it gets to the edge. He's got a protruding chin, and he's got very much this serpent-like look.
Now, do you prescribe at all to the ancient astronauts theory, Zecharia Sitchin, that type of thing?
Well, I certainly like to, and I've read Sitchin, and I think he's done some wonderful work, and I love the ancient alien shows that are on the History Channel, because I think they do very, very good work. They have a different belief system than me, but I think, except for how they interpret it, I like their work. But they're talking about the same prehistory that's recorded all around the world. It's not, this prehistory just isn't recorded in the Bible. This is recorded in all cultures around the world on all continents, and they all tell a different story. And they've got these giants that are just known by different names. Now, these giants and demigods and the ones who create them in the alien mythos is just really a difference in terms of understanding the level of these beings. Are they a god? Or are they just an advanced and alien race? So it's not semantics, but it's essentially just an argument as to how powerful these beings are. And of course, I look at them as fallen angels who produce demigods on Earth. And just as Sitchin, would talk about the Igigi gods and the Anunnaki gods, and you've got the earthborn ones, and you've got the ones who come from the planet, and they do a little bit of DNA manipulation in there. But they're known as the heroes or the titans in Greek mythology. They're known in the subcontinent of India as the Danawa or the Datia or the Zura. You've also got the Myosi and a few other names in China. And you've got the Anunnaki, of course, in Sumeria, the Mesopotamian legends and mythologies and religions. And you've got the Tengu of Japan. And you've got Xibalba of the Quiché Maya, and on and on and on of these different names. This is just a common historical record that's out there, a common history. It's just a matter of how it's being understood and what lens it is. And so the Bible is viewing it from a monotheistic lens. The other cultures around the world have a polytheist lens. But they're referring to the same beings and the same pantheon of gods, and the ancient alien mythos is referring to the same stories and utilizing those stories all around the world, even though they don't always want to go back to the serpent sort of look of these procreators that are described. They kind of leave that a little bit short in terms of how they connect it. But other than that, their research is fabulous.
Is there a worldwide cover-up / conspiracy trying to hide any evidence that points to the existence of these giants?
Oh, I think so. And there's, been a few groups throughout history, particularly in the West, that tend to keep all of this information suffocated, if I can put it that way, and I don't think they've destroyed it. So you've had the Vatican for 2,000 years collecting these things all throughout history, and in a Catholic church they don't talk about giants, so they're obviously not wanting to deal with it, or they're trying to just keep that information hidden. You've also got the Royal Society and the Smithsonian in the West that work seemingly hand in hand, and of course the Smithsonian reports to the Royal Society, just as the money came from James Smithson, who was a Royal Society member, and then it gets gifted to the United States through some Masonic precedents to get it through Congress to set up the organization. Just a quick history, but all of the bones that are discovered in the newspapers that I mentioned to earlier that were, are recorded in, between about 1850 and 1950, they all go to a university or directly to the Smithsonian, and then they just disappear. So if you're going to understand giants, and if you're going to understand prehistory, and you're going to understand what's going on in this world, in my opinion, in my research, you also have to understand secret societies. Because the Masonic Society is as old as the beginning of these stories, and is all sort of wrapped around this whole history.
And also the Native Americans have a history of giants, don't they?
A very, very, very strong recollection as part of their history, and they certainly would not call it mythology. And typically, they're talking about red-haired giants, and large, several tribes in different locations. And this also goes right down through the Americas, Central America, and down into South America of these records of giants. But the ones that they're talking about in North America are the red-haired ones. And in the understanding coming out of the Middle East area for these legends, and I think, some of the statues that are shown in Central America might suggest that there's some other skin colors to the giants, but certainly from the Western perspective, they are very much a pale white color of skin. And they have two sort of significant branches. One is the typical noble Celt, and what eventually Dracula is going to be based on is pale skin, hazel eyes, and red hair. And that's kind of part of the Tuatha De Danann as it comes down through these tribes and different types of names of giants through history. And from the Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England area. But also descending from Scythia as the Lords of Anu or the tribe of Danu. And I have all of that cataloged in my book as well for people. And then there's the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, sort of Aryan sort of look, who migrated north into Russia, into Germany, and into Sweden, forming those kingships and ruling those nations. And so the red-haired ones seem to be the ones that came across from either directly from the Middle East with red hair or from Ireland. And you've got, more research being shown for cases for both. But when we look at some of the research that's coming out of the red-haired elongated skulls out of Peru, they're showing a connection back to Scotland and then back to Scythia. And Scythia seems to be sort of that centerpiece. And where the giants from the Middle East and the Promised Land that we're talking about that are recorded in the Bible, they come from Scythia as well. And that's why you have that name, Scythopolis, as a city of power, the house of power, the house of Shay, which is another connection to the Tuatha De Danann with the word Shay, S-I-D-H-E.
Does Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, does he factor into this at all? Is he his own separate lineage, or could some of these Nephilim possibly be spotted nowadays and be labeled as a Bigfoot?
I think the Bigfoot and Sasquatch is a completely different being. Again, it's similar to the Nephilim mythos and mythology. It seems to go way back into history. It's on all continents, called by different names all around the world. It's hairy like Nephilim are. It tends to live in the woods and escapes into caves, which is the portal and the Shay connection, just as the fairies have these portal connections as well, and I'll just connect those back in a minute. So I think they're part of this greater Nephilim creation concept. And in the Bible, it talks about before the flood with these fallen angels who procreate with human females, is that this causes not only the flood, but because of what they did, it makes the whole world corrupt. And if you take that word, again, back to Hebrew, and I'm a real fan of doing that in my research so that you can understand the full meaning of the word, is that this corruption doesn't mean just violence, as what most people think that causes the flood. This is the corruption of all of the animals and all of the plants, so the genomes, the DNA, and you get these stories coming out of prehistory that are talking about all of these fabulous different beasts that are created, and they're all created from these gods, right? And whether or not it's through a physical copulation or it's through some sort of DNA manipulation, they're all created from the gods. And so you've got things like centaurs and cyclops and hectopteron giants and satyrs and chimeras and Pegasus and mermaids and on and on and on about these seemingly crossbred, cross-DNA pollinated, sexually created, however they were created, these things are all around the world. And you've got elephant gods, and you've got just on and on and on about all these different types of beings. And this is that violation against creation that the book of Enoch, I think, talks about. And that is creating these reprobate beings because you're putting the immortal spirit into the Nephilim. And that's why God limits life to 120 years in the generations going forward, again, coming out of Genesis 6:1-4. And that's how you get this name demigods. And just as you get heroes, just to underline and sort of double tap that point, heroes in this ancient concept isn't the same idea as we recognize a hero as today, although it is reflected in the word superhero that is so popular today. Hero was, in its ancient meaning, the offspring of the gods and a human female. Now, these other beings, they didn't seem to have this immortal spirit, or they were created afterwards, or something else was going on. But they're different, and including the little ones. And so you've got three groups of elementals. And again, this is all over the world, on all continents, except for Antarctica, when I say all continents, that they're in all legends, mythologies. They're not in the Bible, but again, very, very strong in North American culture. And you've got three groups of that. You've got the mischievous ones, you've got the good-looking ones, and then you've got the ugly ones like the gnomes and the trolls and the goblins as being sort of the ugly ones. And so I think there was a lot of corruption going on in the Antediluvian world that we're starting to get close to in our ability with technology. So I think it was either done through technology or maybe, as in the legends say, these gods were having sex with animals to create these beasts, for lack of a better word.
Speaking of beasts, when did you first hear about the reptilians?
Well, the reptilians are very, very well known in alien mythos, and I'm a science fiction fan too, so I'm not unaware of the connections there. But this understanding that the Nephilim might be reptilian came out of the Gnostic Gospels, and so I wanted to bring that back biblically to see whether or not I could, verify that. And there was, I'm trying to remember the name of the Gnostic Gospel. In Origin of the World, as I recall, it describes the archons or the angels or the gods of the Antediluvian epoch, known as watchers, just as they're called in the book of Enoch. And I can take watchers back into the Bible and bring that back to angels as well. But how it describes them there was that They were referred to as having long, narrow faces, prominent cheekbones, elongated jawbones, slanted eyes, and thin lips, and had this very much a snake-like look. And in the dialogue of the Savior, the Gnostic Gospels, it says the Archon referred to as the hostile rulers and the celestial mafia, and it goes on and gives a very much a similar description. And so I brought that back to the Bible using Isaiah 6, where it has the word seraph or seraphim, depending which translation that you're using on the Bible. And that goes back to fiery serpent. And then all of a sudden, when you link that into descriptions around the world, as in the Atlantean mythologies, or into the offspring of the Nagas in the subcontinent, and the Nagas were a serpent-like god, and their offspring in their warrior class looked just like them. This is a common story that the offspring of the gods look just like the gods. And then all of a sudden it starts to hit you that if you look at prehistory, you've got all of the gods being, for the most part, being represented as serpents. And there's a few exceptions, like the Anunnaki. There's some have this bird-like look, just like in Japan you've got the Tengu that also have this bird-like look. But where I'm going with this is there may be a couple different kinds of looks to these, but the main one is the serpent mythology. And then if you connect that into, let's say, the Quiche Maya, for example, and into North American religions and legends, you've got Quetzalcoatl, who's the feathered serpent. Well, a seraphim angel who has the face of a viper, as they're called, fiery serpents, also has feathers. And this is a dragon look, as an angelic dragon, and it is also the same description as what they're basically calling Quetzalcoatl and the other gods that would be named in other cultures in Central and South America that are essentially the same god as Quetzalcoatl, like Kontiki or Votan or Viracocha, just to name a few to put some substantiation to that. And then you move over to the Chinese legend and mythology, which does come out of the subcontinent of India, but the dragons are the heavenly rulers and the creators, just as what they are in Japan. And then you look at all of the imagery around the kings who all take their genealogies back to these beings, and they're all referred to as serpents, just as Osiris is a serpent god, just as all of the kings of Sumeria and Mesopotamia were considered serpent kings. And so this is just one of those common world constants that is absolutely everywhere. And then even after the flood in North America, you've got like the Hopi and other Indian tribes who take their civilization being started from a race that survives off an island that is destroyed by a great flood, and they call them the White Snake Clan. So again, you've got the survivors looking like snakes, just as the Atlantean mythologies, the Egyptian mythologies, and the Quiche Maya legends. You've got all of these survivors after the flood looking like white snake people as well. So it's hard to ignore it after a while, that you have to say that there's something to this reptilian look. And then there's another reptilian that I looked at that has a possibility. I don't have anything scripturally for how they would survive, but if you look at the Eden story in Genesis 2, you have a Nakash or a serpent that is deceiving Eve to eat the apple, and then Adam's going to eat the apple as well. Well, we recognize that snake as what happens as a consequence in terms of working with Satan or being coached by Satan to deceive Adam and Eve, and thus the fall of humankind in the Garden of Eden. But before this happens, and literally he loses his arms, he loses his legs, it loses his voice, it loses his intelligence, and loses its position in the kingdom. And in other religions and in other mythologies, this Nakash, this serpent, is considered of a kingly or Magianic type status. And in the Gnostic Gospels, it was described as being as big as a camel. So it was bigger than a human, probably not as big as the Nephilim. And then when you connect back that you've got this word watcher that I was talking about, that are the seraphim angels that are recorded in the Bible and are the sons of God of Genesis 6, and then you understand that the Urshu gods and the Neter gods in Egypt, if you take that back to its meaning, it means watchers or ones who watch. Just as if you take the word drakon or drakonta, which dragon comes from, out of Greek, that means to watch. And so you've got all of these connections back to serpents and watchers and gods and fallen angels. And at some point in time, you have to, at least I did, I just said, this just cannot be coincidence, because it's got to be almost a mathematical zero for that to happen.
Yeah, I'm aware of this this passage from one of the Dead Sea Scrolls about the Watchers. It's called the Testament of Amram, and there's a part where somebody in there, he's describing one of these Watchers, and he says something like his face is like a snake or an adder.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it says. And again, this is just, it's a common legacy around the world. The Nagas out of India, that word goes back to cobra, as opposed to just being a generic snake. It's a cobra look. And Sarpa is a Sanskrit word, which is the generic name in Sanskrit for snake. What's important about understanding the cobra look, that's what's also part of the Egyptian iconology. And when you see like the pharaohs with that flared out headdress that usually has brightly colored stripes going perpendicular to it, that is a representation of the head of a cobra with that neck flared out. And typically they've got a cobra on their forehead and in a few other areas on their dress as part of the iconology of the royal bloodline. Snake, crocodiles, and dragons were known as the same being in antiquity or in prehistory.
And also, Vlad Dracula, he was his name means the son of the dragon.
Yeah, exactly. So Dracul is dragon, and you put the A on that, it means son of a dragon. And again, that is no coincidence. So and that whole imagery is based on the Nephilim and the patriarchal allegories of the dragon bloodline. And so in the reptilian side of this, you have the patriarchal bloodline of the males as being allegorized as dragons and or ravens. And the matriarchal side is owls and fairies. And so if we now link this back to, I'll link this back to Vlad and Nephilim, and also back to Lilith, if you bear with me on this.
Oh, we're going all the way back to Lilith.
Yeah, why not, right?
Sure.
So the Dracula figure is based on Vlad III, son of Vlad II, so Dracul and Dracula. And in 1439, Vlad the Impaler was inducted into, you guessed it, the Ordo Draconis by Sigismund of the Hungarian kingship. And this organization was started in 1397 to start putting the dragon bloodlines back on the thrones because they were being pushed off in mainland Europe.
Wow.
And at this point in time, the House of Hungary, which this is what I'm referring to in terms of Sigismund, was also the Holy Roman Empire and the King of Jerusalem. And he had two significant iconologies in their coat of arms and depictions. So you'll see the double eagle of the Anunnaki, and you will see the double cross, which is the heraldic bloodline. The House of Lorraine is more famous for, but it goes over to Hungary for a while, and then a few years after Sigismund dies, it goes back to Lorraine, to Rene, King Rene of the Lorraine region, who is a descendant of the Knights Templar, and I won't take you down all of that, where King of Jerusalem title gets instituted in 1118 in a small priory on the Rock of Zion in Jerusalem. But anyways, so what they're telling you here is that they're going to base this bloodline on a royal noble Celt, because his bloodlines go back to Scythia, just as Prince Charles takes his genealogy back to Vlad the Impaler. And he is, called Dracula, or Dracul, and he's part of the Ordo Draconis. And here's a little bit now about it, the description of what he looked like. So he had fair skin, so that pale white skin I was telling you about. He had reddish hair, so the reddish hair of the noble Celt, aka Tuatha Danann, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, and England. Green eyes, which are hazel eyes, and he was regarded as a noble Celt because he takes his genealogy back to the Scythians that we talked about earlier. And of course the Scythians were known as the dragon people, just as the Sarmatians were and the Amazons were. They're all part of the same group of people. He was educated at a mystery school of Solomon, so he's part of the mystical aspect, and he's in this secret society, Ordo Draconis, to put the Dragon Kings back on the throne and to pursue the pursuits of Thoth, which is the knowledge that was developed in Egypt and parallel over in Mesopotamia, but that's another rabbit hole I won't go down today. And he drank blood just as, to enhance his brain qualities, his intelligence qualities, and hopefully to try and live longer. And just as Nephilim drank blood, to do the same thing in the Antediluvian epoch. And he was affected by sunlight, so he couldn't go out very much during the day. So he's very much a night operator. So this whole thing is basically set on Nephilim, who are against God and Christianity, as we come at it from a monotheist perspective, who is based on the bloodlines of the Nephilim and the allegories of the Nephilim. Now, Lilith is also a Nephilim, as she comes out of prehistory. She's not an original god. She's an offspring of an offspring. So likely a demigod Nephilim. And what's interesting about Lilith is that she is considered a Lamia, which is a blood-sucking demon, or a female Upier. And Upier goes back to Scythian and Celtic words of Oberon, as in King Oberon of the fairies, which I'm not going to go down the fairy line, who's married to Titania, which is another name for a hero and a Nephilim, and he's the king of the fairies, or the Tuatha Danann, as they take sort of those allegories back, and Uper, which is also connected to Upiers, as it goes back into the Scythian language of the Black Sea area, just as Vlad was considered an Upier, and that's just an overlord or a Pendragon. But anyway, Lilith is a blood-sucking demon, a female Upier, a night witch that flies at night like a screech owl, as in Greek mythology labels her. And she's the killer of infants and has child sacrifice. And, you get the name Lilith coming out of the Bible, from the word Lilith, L-I-L-I-T, which is, sort of the original spelling of the Greek word for screech owl, and this screech owl would hop on one foot like a goat, which again will get you back into occult allegories that I won't go into today. But where I'm going with this is that they both connect back to strigoi, which is a Romanian word, which was popular for vampire in Romania and into the Transylvania area. So now we're getting a link back into there. And the Latin word strix also means screech owl, as in Lilith. And so these strigois were vampires that flew at night as night witches, or Upiers and or vampires. So anyways, that's just sort of very fast, sort of quick history on the Dracula connection to reptilians.
Awesome. Definitely
Oh,
appreciate
and-
that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and let's also put those cobra fangs on the vampire Dracula just to finish the whole imagery.
And also, I heard you earlier mention Pendragon. Is that similar to the King Arthur? Sorry, King Arthur type stuff?
Oh, absolutely, it is. And Pendragon is like head dragon or the king, and it represents that patriarchal bloodline. And so King Arthur is actually a descendant of the Tuatha De Danann. That's one of his bloodlines, just as his wife Guinevere is a fairy queen, and all of that name breaks down as you go into Old Celt back into fairies. And so anyways, this is just, again, the same sort of bloodline, the same sort of story connecting the genealogies and the bloodlines. In this case, they're using the fairy allegory through Guinevere, even though you've got a Pendragon aspect of King Arthur, because his father is called Uther Pendragon, right? So this is that same bloodline that's coming down. Now, what's interesting about this bloodline that they're talking about in King Arthur, it's the same bloodline that produces a daughter out of King Lucius, whose name is Urgan, who is going to cross over and marry a person by the name of Amenabad of the Merovingian bloodline. And, of course, the Merovingian has a whole mythology about that and their royal bloodlines, but very much connected into these bloodlines out of King Arthur and the Nephilim bloodlines.
One thing that gets me a little mixed up, I got into the David Icke books years ago, and he seems to think that the Anunnaki were all reptilians, and there's various people out there that think that that's completely false. They weren't reptilians, they were giants, they were something else. Were the Anunnaki, were they all reptilian aliens?
Well, I wouldn't view them as aliens, but that would be one interpretation of them as aliens. The Anunnaki are described by the people who recorded them in Mesopotamia as their gods. And you had two levels of Anunnaki. You have the heavenly Anunnaki and you have the earthly Anunnaki. So the earthly Anunnaki are just Nephilim giants, another name for Nephilim or Titan. And these were the ring lords and the kings of the Antediluvian world in Sumeria and related areas. So yes, they were a reptilian, and you've got Oannes, who is looked at just as Dagon as a fish god, but as they get more into the research is it shouldn't be more of a fish god, it should be more of a reptilian god that comes out of the seas that is going to provide civilization and knowledge. So you've got two different sort of branches, both reptilian, and then you've got these feathered Anunnaki, which is that sort of different breed as well, because they've got more of that raven face. And as if you recall, as I was talking about the bloodlines of the patriarchal bloodline, you've got the dragon allegory and you've got the raven allegory. So that's what's being represented there.
So this is why you were kind of alluding to this earlier, that a lot of religions and different faiths and mythologies, they have these beings that have, like in ancient Egypt, for example, they have different types of animals for their faces, or the bottom part might be an animal, stuff like that.
Yeah, there's more going on than just being the seraphim, fiery, viper-looking face. So because you do have these other beings, and you also have recorded in India and in the Bible and in other places around the world that there was another race of lion men that seems to go back to the angel or god Ariel, because he had the face of a lion. And you've got all these depictions of lion men and lion gods throughout Egypt and Mesopotamia, and also recorded even after the flood at the time of David's mighty men, part of the people he's wiping out, which is another reason why I think that they are Nephilim, because they're described as mighty ones as well, which is Gibborim, which is sort of the same description that Nephilim are going to be described as in the Bible. And as you say, you've got these sort of dog-like looking beings as well. So in Egypt, even though the parent gods seem to be the Ogdod, which are the reptilian level. And again, in if not to bore the audience, I hope here, but in most of the pantheons around the world, you have two sets of gods. So you've got like the Ogdod gods, which are sort of the parent gods in Egypt, and below that, then you've got like the serpent god of Osiris and Isis, and Horus as being the son after that. Or in Greek mythology, you've got like Kronos and Gaius and other serpent-like gods who are the parent gods to gods like Poseidon or Zeus and the Olympian gods. And just as you've got Anu as the parent god for the Anunnaki, and he's going to be the father to Enki and Enlil and again all of those other second level of gods, and El in Canaan is the father of Baal and Mot and a few other gods as well. So you've got sort of that sort of parent god, and then you've got these other lower level gods, and it's the second level of gods like Osiris or Baal or Zeus or Enki who produced the earthborn demigods. So it's that second group that then goes one step further, seemingly to corrupt the laws corrupt the laws of creation. Just as in the Egyptian mythology and legends and religion, you have a female lioness goddess called Bast, and she's the goddess of witchcraft and lust and sexual behavior, and is the one who's accredited for opening Pandora's box of creating all of these beasts and that we see in prehistory, at least from the Egyptian lens.
Yeah, this is all very fascinating. I know that there was some sort of race of dog-faced people that existed throughout the past, and they were even renowned for having a very skilled army, and they would wear the same armor and use the same weapons as the humans of the time, and they were feared by the humans.
Yeah, I keep getting asked to do shows on the dog people. I got to look into them. I've not spent any time on them, but there seems to be, again, a whole sort of mythos that goes right throughout the generations about the dog people. So I think it's probably like the Nephilim, and it's probably like the lion men, because the lion men were great warriors. And, the Tengu, which were those bird-like ones, they also produced warriors and a priest class that looked like them as well. So lots of different stories that go hand in hand at the same time of the creation of the serpent-like Naga-type warriors and kings, or the Nephilim serpent kings.
Yeah, I absolutely love it, because, I mean, what we're taught as kids is, in my opinion, we're taught that the history of this planet, we're taught it in a very boring way, in my opinion, and the truth very well might be that there were all kinds of creatures on this planet, intelligent creatures with all sorts of different looks and physiologies, and I find that to be a lot more interesting and a lot more fascinating than the textbook typical way of teaching people about history.
I agree with that, and I would include, the various elves. I mean, if you look at Tolkien's Ring Lords or the Lord of the Rings, I mean, he's got all sorts of little people in there, like the hobbits and the dwarves, and he's just sort of piecing away at it. And then you've got the noble elf in there, right? And that is more or less going back to the Tuatha. They don't show him as a giant, but that's what that allegory is depicting. And it's a pre-flood story, because at the end of the trilogy, you see these different beings sailing away, and the reason given is now it's the time of man. And so they sail away, and that's kind of the allegory of the flood. But I think Tolkien was reflecting, the Norse fairy ideology onto the prehistory, and giving us a glimpse at what some of the other cultures believed what happened in prehistory.
Do you believe that these reptilians might be behind modern day alien abductions?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. And again, depending on who these reptilian aliens actually are, there certainly seem to be part of that sort of hierarchy of the aliens. But let me give you a connection into aliens and what I've been talking about, these other beings that were created before the flood, and what I was just talking about in terms of Tolkien. So I talked about the ugly class of fairies as part of the three groups of the elementals. And in that classification, there's one called the gnomes. And in the gnomes, and all of these little people had a specific job or purpose as they were created for. So like as you see reflected in Lord of the Rings, you've got the dwarves that they're kind of like miners and live in mountains and create tools for the gods. That's quite common throughout the fairy mythology. The gnomes guarded the knowledge and the genealogies and the technology. And so I put in my book an encounter of fairies, and these are the gnomes, who come through portals, fairy shays, fairy mounds, and they come through with these flying machines. And this is an ancient account. It's probably 400 or 500 years old, the account I put in the book. And they kidnap people for a fortnight, and they do experiments on people, both sexually and scientifically, and they're trying to reinvigorate their bloodline, and then they return them after a fortnight or 14 days. And the description that I provide of these gnomes are an identical description to the gray aliens. And in fact, they call them the grays or the gray neighbors, but they're always attached with a gray, and the description is all the same. Then I do another one that's in South America. And if you didn't know it was a fairy abduction, you'd swear it was a gray alien abduction. So if part of that has been going on through prehistory and people, or throughout history, and people understanding it at the technology and the knowledge level that they had as fairies, and actually they have this highly technologically advanced flying machines and technology. How many other ones might have survived coming out of prehistory? And I make a case in the book, and I like to talk about that. The technology that was before the flood, it was as great as what we have today and likely even greater. And biblically, I back that up because in Jesus' second coming, it's going to be like the days of Noah. And we have not hit the end of days yet, and Jesus hasn't returned yet, and we're not in the end times quite yet. So that means, with the case that I'm making, is then likely the technology had to be more advanced in the Antediluvian epoch than what we have today. And this comes from two sources. You have the knowledge coming from the gods, or the angels, being married with the seven sacred sciences, as the secret societies like to talk about, which are the seven liberal arts today that are taught in school, that they took to a whole new level with the help of the fallen angels that helped corrupt the whole world. So they were able to build, and they actually credit Enoch, son of Cain, not Enoch, son of Jared, there's two Enochs, with providing the knowledge to build the pyramids. And just as you get a relief that depicts the 52-degree pyramid on the Menes stellar relief that goes back to 3000 BC, which predates the construction that standard Egyptologists will cite at 2400 BC. This is 3000 BC. And so this is the knowledge that they had developed through this Enochian knowledge. And then it's developed into what they call the seven sacred sciences. And so Enoch is one of Masonry's greatest patriarchs, because this is also when the secret societies that I mentioned earlier are founded through this knowledge. Just as the mystical religions are founded, the secret societies are founded in partnership to develop certain aspects of it. And so Tubal-Cain Nama, Jubal, and Jubal are also significant patriarchs for Freemasonry, and Jubal because he actually develops the fifth science, which is geometry, and called in the craft or the secret societies as Masonry, and develops that at a whole new level in this sort of second sort of explosion of knowledge that happens with the progeny of Lamech. Again, Lamech of the Cain line, not of the Seth line that I'm talking about here. And just as Nimrod is considered the first grand master of Freemasonry after the flood, who utilizes the knowledge that Hermes finds to partner with to build Babel and the Tower of Babel. So Masonic history goes back to this technology that was brought by the gods, and in the mythologies around the world, they all talk about cities being built by the gods that they inherited, and then the gods taught them everything after that. And this sort of helps to explain how you have like the Mayan calendar, the Aztec calendar that was created. That is we only in the last few years have had the ability to have that kind of knowledge of astronomy and how the eclipses and things are coming about. So I kind of did a bit of a long-winded thing there, but I just wanted to get more context around what I was talking about in terms of the technology and in terms of the beings that were created in the past, and that they probably had a higher level of technology than we have today, which would account for why, if they were able to survive and go through portals and in other dimensions, how they're able to have flying saucers or spaceships or interdimensional crafts, whatever you want to call them.
Now, do these reptilians, do they come from space, inner Earth, or another dimension?
Yeah, I think they're coming from another dimension. The portal aspect is just way, way, way too common. I'm only speculating on this, obviously. But I think that's more likely. As opposed to, I think what we're going to be told, though, when we get this complete introduction to the aliens, and there'll be many probably different kinds, just as what we see shown in like Star Wars or Star Trek, that we're just one of many species in the galaxy or in the universe, and we're going to have to join them in their fight against this other force that's out there if we want our freedom. I think that's what they're going to offer. And everything that you see in the alien mythos is still duality of good aliens, bad aliens, but they're an equal good and evil. They're in equal sort of levels of force. Then they're always perpetually at war throughout eternity, and that's the dualistic part of the mystical religions as well. So I think that's what we're going to see when we get an encounter. What do they call it? The fourth kind.
Are these underground bases I hear about with reptilian and human joint operations, are they real?
Well, I don't think we have enough information to prove that they're real. I think it's likely that they're real. We're certainly hearing lots of accounts about things like that. And you see a lot of different things being attached to it. So you see different kinds of aliens, and you hear about the word Anunnaki again, and you hear about reptilians, and you also hear about the Nephilim in these underground bases and stuff, just as you've got going on in Antarctica today. So I think that is, and from what I think about how the end time is going to come about, I think that has to be true as I deduce this and put it together, because I think it's part of what the Christians and how I would understand part of end time prophecy with the great deception and the great delusion that's going to come out in the end time.
And on that note, do Satanists and Luciferians run the world from behind the scenes?
Yep. Simple answer is absolutely yes. And of course, Satan is the great serpent, right? He's the dragon. He's part seraphim and also part cherub. I think he was demoted from cherub to seraphim, but he is reptilian as well, isn't he?
Yeah, my show has been focusing on exposing a lot of the Luciferian and satanic connections that are out there. That's something that I've been doing recently, and when you really get into it, it's really scary because you realize this stuff is real, and they might be behind a lot of the music industry and some of our favorite bands.
Yeah, there's an influence in so many aspects, whether or not it's in music, whether or not it is in the occult literature, like in the Tolkien literature that I was talking about, or it's in science fiction. You get this all throughout our literature and our entertainment and influence. And typically you have, and if you're going to get into this rabbit hole, you need to sort of understand that this partnership goes back to prehistory, right? So as I talked about, you've got the knowledge aspect and the sciences, you've got the secret societies, you've got the priest and the religion aspect of it, and you've got the bloodlines or from the original Nephilim and the royal families as they come down through history, is all sort of working together. And so they do operate from the shadows and are controlling things because they do want to bring about the end time and a rendezvous with destiny, because in their belief system, they want to have this showdown with the God of the Bible and win the freedom. So I think all of this is going to probably come about in the not so distant future, but we'll have to wait and see.
What about these people that say all alien sightings are demons? It's always a trick. If you're abducted, if you see a spaceship, if you have a close encounter of the third kind, it's always a demonic trick.
Yeah, I think that's an oversimplification, and I think you can make a case that some of the aliens are a demonic force. Demons would be, when I use that word demon, that would be like a bodiless spirit of a giant. So when we talk about demonic, that means they've either taken on another shape or they are a Nephilim type creation that's a violation against creation that we talked about earlier. And in this case, one of them might be, the gray fairies as a gray alien. But angels also have the ability to shapeshift, and the gods did, as we understand, coming down through prehistory as well. So they can take some different forms. So I think you have an aspect of them interplaying as part of the alien mythos, but I think there's too many that are recorded as beings throughout prehistory that seem to show up in the alien mythos. I mean, you can even make an argument that Chewbacca, as it's depicted in Star Wars, would be very similar to Bigfoot, right? And again, we talked about kind of a close association of that particular strain of being with Nephilim. So I think there's more that were survived either in the earth or off the earth, and that have been around since before the flood and have great technology. I think that's part of it as well.
How about these claims that when nobody's around, the queen shapeshifts into a reptilian?
Yeah, I think that comes out of the Ike aspect, doesn't it? But
sure does.
Again, we don't really have any proof of this, but if you want to take that back to how would that be possible? Well, if the angels have the ability to shapeshift when they come into the physical world and take a sex and a form of their choice, and if they did have offspring and they did pass on in the initial generation the immortal spirit, and if they did pass on other traits like great dexterity and size and their looks, what other traits did they pass on? So if you wanted to make a connection, that you could say that shape-shifting ability may have been passed on. That's the only way that you could do it. My preferred position on it is that I think over time, even though they tried to keep their bloodlines pure, they've had to introduce a lot of human bloodlines, and they have become basically the same size and similar looks, even though they've got purer bloodlines than most of the other humans, because they've been trying to integrate and keep those bloodlines pure, and it's still part of their family traits.
did these beings, the giants and the reptilians and some of the other ones, did they have any sort of higher abilities, any sort of psychic abilities?
We don't get that. All we get is that they were very powerful beasts, very powerful kings, very powerful warriors, and very fleet of foot, very dexterous. But we don't learn that they had these interdimensional aspects and things like that. So where all of that sort of comes back, and again, understand that organizational structure we're talking about. So when we talk about prehistory and the mystical religions, and you'll notice that there's always like a wizard, which is or a magi, which is sort of that priest class that is developing these sciences and the magic that goes with it and the technology that goes with it, complete with the mystery schools and the secret societies. So I think that technology and knowledge was developed on that side of the organizational structure, and the kings or the Nephilim made use of that.
It sounds like the Freemasons are playing a large role in all of this.
They're playing a very large role in it. They have their own specific agenda. They are part of the intermix, and they're not as high up as some of the other organizations are. And in fact, they are taking a lot of the people, and you have to be invited to join. So they're being brought into the occult society at lower levels and being initiated to the various degrees, whether it's 3 degrees of the old system of the York Rite or the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite, and you become an adept where you get initiated into the Luciferian doctrines only at the 33rd or 3rd degree level. But above that, you have the Illuminati, which is at the center of the Freemasons. And then above that, you've got the Rosicrucians, which about half of them are part of the purebloods. And then you've got, going into the Rosicrucians, organizations like the Illuminati, like the Freemasons reporting to, like the Bilderbergers, like the Bohemian Grove, like the Club of Rome. So it's the Rosicrucians which have more of that secret society influence. And the Rosicrucians break off from the Templars, who we talked about earlier, in about 1188 at the cutting of the elm, and then the Templars are totally broken up in 1307. And after that, you get the establishment because you have the Rosicrucians, who were also the ones who formed this Ordo Draconis that I talked about in 1400. They also form the Freemasons through the Templars, because it's the same organizational group, and you've got the Rosicrucians as a separate organization already. They form the Freemasons, and you have also the Royal Society that is going to be organized in about 1660 and chartered in 1662 between the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians. And you're going to have the Jesuits being reformed back inside the Catholic Church with their agenda, because the Templars were disassembled in 1307, and you have to have the banking arm of the Templars as well. So the Bauer family out of Germany is set up to become the banking arm, who changes their name to Rothschilds in 1812 when they set up the London Bank. And so you've got a lot of that sort of organizational structure of the Templars dispersed, so that you can't be all taken down at once as what King Philip and the Pope did in 1307.
Oh, wow, that is so fascinating. I had no idea that things were so interconnected, and you really laid out the entire picture very well.
Yeah, and their belief system is that their bloodlines, and of course the more pure they are, the higher up you're going to be, goes back into prehistory, back to the demigods, back to the Nephilim, and back to the fallen angels. So that when you have an angel in Roslyn Chapel, which is built by William Sinclair, who is the one who takes over and sponsors Freemasonry after the Templars are disbanded in Scotland, he builds Roslyn Chapel, and he's got this one, many statues and sculptures in there, but I'll describe one, and it's this angel who's hung upside down, and he's got this sort of rope leading away that's in form of either a stylized S or a Z, and he's got this necklace of pearls, and the pearls of wisdom, which is the knowledge that, as in the book of Enoch states, that was given to the descendants of Cain before the flood. And this is Azazel, the leader of the Watchers, who is decoded. And everything they do is linking themselves back. Just as the Sinclairs are one of these famous bloodlines, actually goes back to Rollo, and they changed their name to St. Clair after they expropriate Normandy in France, and it's the Treaty of St. Clair that they take the name of. And this is one of the founders who isn't listed in the founding of the Knights Templar, but he's the battle partner of Hugh de Payon, and this is Henry St. Clair back in 1090. So anyways, I'm just giving some examples of how it intertwines, but they are part of this pure blood religious secret society partnership that goes back into prehistory and who are trying to bring about world government.
So are some humans, or maybe all humans, actually hybrids then?
Oh, definitely. And, there's been hybrids all through history, and some more pure than others, like the Amorites, as we talked about, who King Og and Sihon ruled over. They were considered significantly taller than the average human because they intermarried with the Rephaim. So there are many, many hybrids. Some people believe that the Rh negative bloodline, which most of the royals have, is the bloodline of the Nephilim. And there is about 15% of the world's population that has Rh negative blood. So that suggests there has been a dispersion, and you get very little of it in certain parts of the world, like in Asia for some reason. Heavy concentrations in Europe, and very heavily more concentrated as you get into France. And then the highest concentration was with the Basques. Some people pronounce it Baziki, and they have as high as 80% Rh negative. And they say they call themselves Homo Atlantis, and they were the ones who settled Egypt, Scythia, and Mesopotamia after the flood. And of course, they've had this diaspora because they were pushed out by the bloodlines moving from the Middle East and into Europe. I guess there was some sort of internal squabble as the Basque mythology goes.
Is it true that these giants and reptilian creatures, and perhaps some of the other ones we've been discussing as well, is it true that they actually drink blood and or eat human beings?
Well, if you're going to be involved in a blood-drinking ritual or a cannibal-eating ritual, you're going to be an adept. So it's not done at the lower levels. So you have to be at least an adept of Freemasonry and higher, and probably a little higher still. But I can't say I've witnessed it, but it is sort of common understanding and knowledge of people who have turned away for whatever reasons from those mysteries and rituals that say that it still goes on today. I have a friend who has been saving people out of these clutches of the people who are almost imprisoned by the secret societies for these rituals, and they live a very dangerous life freeing people. He also does some public speaking on it as well, and the stories he tells coming from these people that they save are just absolutely horrific.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've heard about the same phenomena from many different angles. These escapees of these extreme situations of abuse and all kinds of strange stuff going on behind closed curtains, shape shifting and magic and just unbelievable things.
Yeah, and we shouldn't be surprised because that's all part of what was said happened in prehistory as well. It was always part of that religion. It was always part of it, whether it's magic, whether or not it's drinking of blood, whether or not it's sacrifice. And they have that polytheist religion that, descends out of there. And so why would you think that that may not have carried through, especially when they believe that they are superior to humans?
How do you see this whole end times, end of day scenario actually kicking off?
Well, a lot of people get way ahead of themselves on this. So there's some I'll speak from a Christian perspective, that there are some big stumbling blocks. I think we're getting closer, but you have to have, from a Christian prophetic perspective, you have to have the universal religion in place first, Babylon, which brings about world government, which will bring about Antichrist. And part of that is that the Jewish people are going to have to be able to start up their ritual sacrifices on a wing of the temple, as Daniel talks about. So there's only one way for that to happen, is either the Muslims are going to permit it somehow, some way, or the mosque is not actually on where the Holy of Holies was actually situated, and it's slightly further off, closer to the ravine, and which would be accurate to how Josephus described where the temple was, of the temple of Herod. So that has to start. So those are three big stumbling blocks: world government, universal religion, and the Jews permitted in the temple to do their sacrifices. So that's why the universal religion has to come first. So until that happens, we're not going into the end time. And then the other thing is as hard as the globalists and the secret societies and all this leviathan of organizations set up to bring it about, according to biblical prophecy, there's an ordained time. And until the restrainer is removed, it can't happen. Now, they're ready to go, and they'll try and bring it on at a date that's not the ordained time in the Bible, but they will accept the ordained time because they want this rendezvous with destiny. But these are big things that have to come to play. So we're going to need to see some significant things move us in that direction. So one would have to imagine significant catastrophes like nuclear war, alien abductions, apocalyptic things to drive people into this. And so we're going to need to see that show up first from a Christian perspective.
Are schools a part of this? Are children being taught things that are just wrong? Is there some sort of movement behind the scenes to turn the entire world into an atheistic, materialistic type of thing?
Well, the atheistic thing is short term, because if you buy into the fact that it's these organizations and religions and bloodlines, they have a religion. So this is just a temporary thing to break down Christianity and lead them away. And the teachings that they're doing in schools and universities and the literature and the entertainment lead people away from God and discredit God, and prepare them to accept the lie that is coming, and is preparing them to be globalist citizens in nature. And they're fed significant misleading information that transcend borders to drive them into a globalist ideology, whether or not it's an apocalyptic nature of global warming or fear we're going to be blown from the face of the earth with nuclear weapons. All these things are designed by the secret societies to prepare people to accept this notion that that's the only way we're going to survive. And so, yeah, for sure, our kids are being misled and prepared for this.
A lot of people, not even just Christians, right now they are prepping. They're preparing very hard. They're hoarding MREs. They're buying weapons, bullets. They're making sure they have a place to go to the bathroom. They're making sure that they have everything if something does happen. Do you advise taking that route and doing some prepping, or should we all just be trying to get ourselves spiritually right instead?
Yeah, I think you should get spiritually right. Anything that you're going to, if things get into that apocalyptic nature, if you've got weapons, they're going to try and take your weapons. If you've got food, people are going to try and overwhelm you and take your food. So when you have that size of cataclysm, then it's hard to think that you can just sort of bunker yourself down and people aren't going to be looking for you. And so I would say get right spiritually. And the main thing is to, we have free choice. So people have to choose what they want to believe. And there's so many people in this world that sort of go along with the flow, right? And they're not really trying to critically analyze anything or make any firm decisions. You need to make a choice in life what you believe, and you may choose wrong or you may choose right. We won't know until it all plays out, but my advice is learn as much as you can, ask hard questions, and choose spiritually what you think is right. Even as Christians, there's going to be Christians deceived in the end time as well, because even the elect are going to be deceived. So that's why you have to be prepared.
Awesome. And unfortunately, we are headed towards the end of tonight's interview. But Gary, I wanted to open things up just one more time, let you get back up on that soapbox and go ahead and say whatever you would like to say to my audience out there. And please, by all means, follow that up with anything you would like to plug, websites, upcoming projects, appearances, anything at all that you'd like to plug, including social media.
Sure. I think, the thing I'd like to leave the audience with is that there's a hidden history that's kept from us, and it's a common history, and it has everything to do with where our future is going. And so some of the things that we've been talking about tonight might sound out there. I've spent a lot of research on this, and I've connected it into one book so that people can follow it. It's written from a Christian perspective, of course, but it talks, it includes all this information that I've been talking about from mythology and religions from around the world. So you can make your own choice on that. But what I'm saying is that start looking into this, because it's very, very, very important, particularly as we seem to be coming along with this sort of date and destiny to have this full encounter and a full introduction to whatever this alien phenomena is. And even then, my thought process is you better be very careful what you're believing, what they're telling us, because again, your discernment's going to have to be on high, and you need knowledge to do that. So, but my own perspective is we all have to make our own decisions. So do your research and make your decisions as we go forward. And if somebody wants to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me through my website at the Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's Genesis 6 with the number 6conspiracy.com. And on that website, you can email me if you have a question, and I will get back to you if you ask me a question. I also have a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters of my book. If you want to have a look at that, you'll get a good feel for it. If you want to get a signed copy, you can order it through the website. There's also links to Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, BarnesandNoble.com. If you want to order from them, because they will be a little bit less money than me. And you can also get it in Kindle format if you want a digital copy. It's also available through most online bookstores. And if you wanted to order it through your local bookstore and support them, it's distributed through Bookmasters, so they can easily purchase it from Bookmasters out of Pennsylvania. You can, again, follow me, and I put out a provocative post and blog once a week. On Facebook under Gary Wayne, I have 2 Genesis 6 conspiracy pages where I also post those blogs. And I also have a group on Facebook called Gary Wayne, the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. And again, you can get a hold of me on Facebook. And you can also follow me or get a hold of me on Twitter at GaryWayne63, at GaryWayne63.
Awesome. Gary, I had a great time talking to you tonight. We really went deep into the rabbit hole, learned some amazing new things. You are so very well researched, and I would absolutely love to have you on this program again so we can follow up and talk about whatever else you're researching or into.
Sure, I'd love to come back. I just love talking about this stuff and getting the information out. So I tend to be very generous with the information because it's more about just informing people and raising their level of curiosity.
Sweet deal. Definitely, curiosity is one of my favorite things, sharing knowledge and soaking it up. It can be very addicting. And until next time, Gary, thank you so much for joining me here on End of Days Radio. And until we talk again, you have a good night, my friend.
Thank you.
And there you have it. That was Gary Wayne. Oh my God. Fascinating, fascinating. Oh my God. My brain is just like bleeding at this point. My underwear are melting. I am just having a complete breakdown. It was just a load of incredible information. He was connecting all sorts of dots, tying things together, just really blowing my goddamn mind. Blowing my mind, man. He just blew my mind. It's fascinating. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and take a short break, or more like a long break, because I got a wee, and I'm gonna go wee, and I'm gonna eat some sushi. I'm prepared tonight. I'm gonna eat some sushi, drink a little bit more of this caffeine, and I will be back, and I'll be on the attack as well. Hello! How annoying. Hello! Don't you hate when people do that? Like you walk into their house, they're all like, hello! Hello! I'm gonna do that every time we come back from break from now on. Hello! As I walk down the street and I pass by people, hello! Hello! How long until I'm universally hated? Maybe I am already universally hated. Doesn't sound so bad. I did get in a little bit of a, I'm not sure what you would call it, a little bit of a skirmish on Twitter earlier, arguing with another liberal. Those liberals, they come at me, bro. They come at me. There's always one in the mix. Like, most of them are just like, this guy's stupid, I'm just going to ignore him. But one of them always takes the bait. Right? For whatever reason, that day they're just in the mood to fight. But hey, I don't sit there and get in long, protracted arguments with people. I make my point and then I move on. I've got better things to do. If we can't come to an agreement, if I can't convince you, then so be it. I've got things to do, and people that argue on the internet, well, they're stupid. I'd say they're retarded, but you can't say that word anymore. But they're stupid. I've been there, trust me. I got in like a 3-month argument with a guy over the internet before, and that's the experience that changed me. Not only did I stop having pointless arguments on the internet, but in life in general, I stopped having so many pointless little conflicts. You gotta know when it's worth it. All wars are wars of attrition. It's the Art of War by Sun Tzu. You guys ever listen to that audiobook or read it? You know, these businessmen, business people, I should say, they always talk about reading The Art of War for their hot corporate job or their business position or whatever the hell they do. They say you read The Art of War and it's going to give you an edge, right? I read The Art of War and I listened to the audiobook, and I definitely think, like the Bible, that particular book applies to back then, but is harder to interpret in today's day and age. I mean, there's some good stuff in there, don't get me wrong, but I really think somebody needs to write an updated version of that book with real-world examples that people can actually use. I don't think picking the battlefield and making sure the conditions suit me is really a good way to set up a business meeting. Guys, we're going to meet out in the mud. Why? Because it will slow you down and give me an advantage. Why would I want an advantage? Shut up, you're fired. Right? No, I've never fired anybody. I've never been in a position to. I don't really like being in charge of people. I don't like giving orders. I'm not trying to lead this revolution, only ignite it. I wish to walk hand in hand as brothers. I'd be a shitty leader anyways. I'd get you all killed. I can't do it. Follow me. Come on, guys. Charge. Oh shit, we're dying. Okay. So I watched the new Roseanne show. For those of you that aren't aware, Roseanne, the original, what station was it on? Was it ABC, NBC? I should know this. The original Roseanne show. Roseanne Barr, also known as Roseanne Arnold because she married Tom Arnold. Really funny show. Hilarious show. That was one of my favorites. I remember I'd come home from school and I'd watch whatever sitcoms they'd have, and Roseanne was always on. Up here in the Seattle area, I think it was Channel 11. KSIW, something like that. And Roseanne was always on there. And what's her husband on the show's name? John Goodman, great actor. He was in Fallen. But, oh my God, that show was so underrated at the time. It was so funny, so consistently funny, and it was a show about just like normal, fat, trashy, average Americans, right? It wasn't a show about fake, pretty people like what we had for the most part before that. It was so cutting edge. It was so controversial. It was so hilarious. And I went in thinking, because I saw the commercials, I heard about the hype. I didn't watch the new Full House. I didn't watch any of the other ones. I didn't watch the new Boy Meets World. We can talk about Topanga later. I know a lot of you guys out there, she was like your childhood crush. We can talk about her later. But anyways, Roseanne. Roseanne was a show ahead of its time. I know everybody's talking about this, and I know you guys like me to talk about other stuff that the mainstream isn't talking about. But I do like to talk about the mainstream stuff sometimes because it's what's going on. I think it's okay. But I went in with the lowest expectations. I was like, oh my God, this isn't going to work. They're going to try too hard. It's not going to be funny. It's going to be garbage. And I barely wanted to watch it. But I happened to be on Twitter, and I saw a tweet, somebody saying that they had like 20 million viewers. And I was thinking, oh my God, that's a lot of freaking people watching one show. Rarely does any television program get ratings like that nowadays. So after hearing that, and after seeing people were saying that it was good, that it was funny, I went ahead and watched it. Oh my God, I couldn't have been more wrong. I am a big man. I can admit when I'm wrong. I don't mind doing that. I was wrong about this. That show was freaking hilarious. It was just as funny as the original show, the original Roseanne. Had all the same people on it. I'm pretty sure the writer or writers were the same too because the humor was the same. They kind of did a little bit too much of the political stuff, but what they did, it was entertaining, it was funny, and I did appreciate the non-left wing. I appreciate seeing anything that's not super liberal on any TV show, because everything is so liberal on every TV show nowadays because it's called the liberal media. Not that I really give a shit about liberal or conservative in the grand scheme of things, but I'm really annoyed in the here and now with liberal politics and some of the stupid crap that comes out of people's mouths. And it's not just the left. I don't mean to pick on the progressives out there. It's not about that. I think that, trust me, I think that freaking racist white Republicans are just as annoying and detestable, and I totally get why people hate that sort of stereotype. I totally get that. Those people are, you just can't even talk to them. They'll drive you into a rage. Any extreme left or right type of thing is really annoying. The truth is always in the middle, and this is part of the manipulation, etc., etc. But anyways, I don't have to explain myself every time. am so annoyed with liberals. And it's refreshing seeing something other than the extreme in-your-face sort of stuff. You know what I'm talking about? When you're watching your favorite TV show, and then all of a sudden there's two dudes kissing, and you keep watching because you don't want to be homophobic, so you keep watching. And then they start doing other stuff, and you keep watching because you don't want to be a bigot. And then they start doing other stuff, and there's sounds and all kinds of things happening, and you keep watching because you don't want to be a bigot. It's annoying, isn't it? I mean, you can't even puke or get freaked out or get grossed out because this is the norm nowadays. Right? You always have to have people putting forth in TV shows and movies and things like that what they believe because they want to shape society and get other people to think that way. And I totally get it. I mean, I'm all for the gay marriage and gay rights and all that stuff. But I think, like many people, I don't always like seeing that thrust in my face. And then if you say anything, you're this or you're that. And by no means do I have any bias against that sort of thing. I don't care. I think it's wonderful. It's just that I don't like watching, let's say True Blood, for example. I'm watching True Blood, and all of a sudden, there's two guys butt effing on the show. I'm just not looking to see that. If anybody is, then good for you. I think that's great that the programming nowadays meets your particular need. But I want to watch vampires, not necessarily gay vampires. Although I'm sure some people would say that all vampires are gay, right? They do suck a lot. Okay. How did we get on this subject anyways? Oh yeah, so Roseanne. Great show. It's refreshing seeing a show that has more of a conservative type of vibe, although I wouldn't even say it really has that, because you really see both sides on the show, because Roseanne's grandson is like a cross-dresser. He's wearing girl clothes to school, and everybody's worried he's going to get beat up. And then another one of the grandkids is black. So they are really mixing up the cast. They're including every group that you could possibly include. Smart move, by the way. And I also wanted to say that I think that Roseanne is a very smart lady. I mean, she has always used controversy to elevate herself. And she understood how to do it way back in the 90s, right? And she was one of the original stand-up comics that just did not give a fuck. They would just say whatever. So respect to that. She would cuss. Respect to that. Had the balls. Metaphorical balls. Gotta respect that. And even nowadays, when you hear her talk, she sounds like a conspiracy theorist sometimes. She's a smart lady. I'm giving her props. Like, if she even found out about this, me giving her props, that'd be amazing. But I know she won't. I'm just giving her props. I'm just throwing it out there into the void. I'm giving props to Roseanne Barr. I hope Tom Arnold shows up on that show one of these days. He seems like a pretty cool guy. I know he's friends with Arnold Schwarzenegger. But I digress, and I do not mean to rant forever about this topic and get so off track. Let's get into the actual structure of the show. Let's do a news story. Okay, so this one's creepy. Wild, Wild Country. Most shocking reveals from the sex cult's FBI informant. This is from thedailybeast.com. Holy moly, wild, wild country. Most shocking reveals from the sex cult's FBI informant David Barry Knapp, a.k.a. Swami Krishna Deva, the former mayor of Rajneeshpuram, famously flipped on the cult, and his FBI testimony was eye-opening and very disturbing. Netflix Wild Wild Country is so far the must-see television event of 2018. What the hell is this? I do apologize. I don't even know what I'm looking at. This is a show? Okay, so I guess I had this a little bit wrong. So Wild Wild Country is a show on Netflix, but it seems to be based on a real thing. You know what the problem here is? That I should have looked at this story first. Right, obviously. And I usually do. This one got pushed to the top of the list for some reason. So, I do apologize. How embarrassing. Okay, I found it finally. Wild Wild Country is a Netflix documentary series based on the controversial Indian guru Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh and the community of his followers in Oregon. Oh, okay. Interesting. You know, that might not be a bad idea to check that out. I do love watching these sorts of things. Now, I don't want to read this because I want to watch it and it's going to ruin it. Now, what do I do? Okay, let's put that on hold. I'm going to save that and we'll come back to it after I watch the show, okay? Okay, deal. Oh, you guys are so understanding. You always just totally get me. I love it. Okay. Let's move on. This next news story, this comes from apnews.com. U.S. suspects cell phone spying devices in D.C. For the first time, the U.S. government has publicly acknowledged the existence in Washington of what appear to be rogue devices that foreign spies and criminals could be using to track individual cell phones and intercept calls and messages. Oh, speaking of phone calls, I forgot to tell you guys, if you want to call into the show at any time, oh, let me warm up with the guest, of course. I always say that. Don't call in right when I get them on the line. I want to say hi. Don't screw up the getting to know you process too much. But anyways, if you want to call in at 209-348-9810. That's 209-348-9810. Or just add NinjaShoe777 on Skype. That's 209-348-9810. Getting a lot of calls at strange times lately. I totally dig it, but remember, if you call, please leave some sort of funny message or say hi or say rock on end of days. Give me something that I can play on air. If you do that, you are just oh so sweet and helpful. Anyways, where was I? Oh yeah, the cell phone thing. The use of what are known as cell phone site simulators by foreign powers has long been a concern, but American intelligence and law enforcement agencies, which use such eavesdropping equipment themselves, have been silent on the issue until now. In a March 26 letter to Oregon Senator Ron Wyden, the Department of Homeland Security acknowledged that last year it identified suspected unauthorized cell site simulators in the nation's capital. The agency said it had not determined the type of devices in use or who might have been operating them, nor did it say how many it detected or where. Jeez, are these people even capable of doing their jobs? The agency's response, obtained by... Oh, somebody's calling. Hello? Hello?
What's going on, Daniel?
Hey there, buddy.
What's happening?
Not much. Just chilling, just doing a little news.
It's one of my favorite parts of your show.
Yeah, looks like these listening devices, they're being revealed. It turns out that this has been going on for a while. The Department of Homeland Security acknowledged that last year it identified suspected unauthorized cell site simulators in the nation's capital. So they're doing this in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and the only reason you're hearing about it is because it's in Washington, D.C., because I heard about those fake cell towers about 2 or 3 years ago, they were doing stories about how there'd be like a cactus, and it would tip over, and there was a stingray inside it. That was getting everybody's information.
The agency's response obtained by the Associated Press from Wyden's office suggests little has been done about such equipment known popularly as stingrays.
Yeah, whenever I like to refer to it as stingray, stingray,
Stingrays,
stingray,
stingrays,
stingray,
stingrays. Who killed the crocodile hunter? It was stingrays.
Sting your ass.
Sting your ass to death.
But the most horrible part about the stingray is anyone on Earth could have one.
Yeah,
so
I bet. You know what? I bet they.
Evil.
It says right here later in the article that you can get one for just $1,000.
Yeah, so everybody go out and get one. It's spying everyone. It's great. Yeah. They left us wide open, Daniel. Our own government that's supposed to protect us, that tells us about the terrorists all day long. They left the internet and all of our computer devices, everything wide open so they could use it. But that means the criminals can too.
Those idiots.
That's horrible. That's horrible.
Those morons.
No, it wasn't moronic. It was genius. They're like, we'll leave it open. Everybody's stuff will be compromised, but we can access it.
Well, hey, Todd, you know what Windows is, right?
Yeah, it's a computer program invented by Bill Gates.
Yeah, and it costs money and you pay for it, but there's a free operating system called Linux, and it's free for anybody that they could use, and it's way more secure than Windows, which costs money.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, it is very weird, but that's part of the conspiracy, I guess, to leave us all kind of vulnerable.
Well, I heard a rumor, and it's just something I barely remember, that Bill Gates he left the back door in all the computers. That's why he's the number 6 billionaire in the world.
Bill Gates left his back door open?
For all the computers. They didn't tell anybody.
He's one of those, whatchamacallits, isn't he? One of those people that want to... No. Like a philanthropist, but instead you want to kill people with... Oh, a eugenicist.
Oh, eugenicist. Yeah, his dad. I don't want to go into the eugenicist movement because other people are so more well-versed in that. And it's already been told. Man, your show's cool. That last guest tonight,
Thanks.
Your guest tonight, that was so cool. And then you're so cool.
Oh.
What did you get contacted by the Illuminati?
Yeah, I keep getting these letters and these offers. Like, I got one sent to my email, and I got one on Twitter saying, Daniel, saying, hey, call this number and we'll give you all this money. All you have to do is join.
Wouldn't that be wild if they're like, meet us at this address, and it's like American Satan, where you go in, there's all these women and guitars, and have whatever you'd like, sir.
Deal.
That'd be weird.
I'd be like, okay, deal. Where do I sign? Give me that pen. Show me where I sign right now. Yeah, that's how I'm going to become the next Alex Jones. All I got to do is sign on the dotted line. We all know he did it.
I got to say a couple things about... Go on.
Oh, I was just joking. I said we all know he did it.
Who, Alex Jones?
Yeah, he signed on the dotted line.
Well, he did get the Bohemian Grove.
That's how he got it.
I never even heard of Bohemian Grove until there was suddenly this hoopla about the Bohemian Grove. That's me.
He bent over for Walter Cronkite.
But did you ever see that video with Walter Cronkite where he's like, I've been accused of being in support of a Luciferian world government?
No, I have not seen
video?
that. No, that sounds
it's
interesting.
Incredible. Where Walter Cronkite says, if that's the case, then join me at the right hand of Satan. It is so good.
What?
Oh, yeah, look that up. Walter Cronkite, join me at the right hand of Satan.
You know,
it's off record.
Just when I think I've seen it all.
Uh-huh.
There's always something out there that I haven't seen yet.
Oh, completely. And I mean, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's, it's so funny because I thought that I knew a lot, but this show has taught me that stuff about there being a Luciferian or satanic inner core to things, it's true. Like, as hard as it is to believe, it's reality.
Well, I think there's something there, Daniel, with this Luciferian thing, you know? Like when you get to the 33rd level of the frickin' Masons, you know, they introduce you to Lucifer at high levels of the intelligence services. There's Luciferians. I don't think it's all Lucifer. Even that's just a gimmick. That's a gimmick, because what's going to get your attention bigger than the image of Satan or Lucifer?
Well, some people do believe that Lucifer and Jesus are the same person.
That's how they get you to keep from burning your hand on the stove, is they tell you Satan's going to get you.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I think there's something to what you're saying, Todd, but at the same time, I do think that it works both ways too. I mean, if it's a gimmick, and I'm sure it is, then we could look at Lucifer as a concept, and we could look at it as something that plays out, and we could look at it as an archetype, we could look at it as a symbol, a metaphor. It's just a spiritual concept that plays itself out again and again, no matter where and when you are in any reality.
Yeah, an archetype they play over and over. But I that topic, you know, it's kind of stale. Same. Run around with a pitchfork.
Yeah, but it just depends what he's doing with that pitchfork. Maybe he's sticking it up somebody's ass.
Well, there's better topics. I thought it was pretty cool that he just, you know, was open-minded towards all kinds of weird stuff, and then went into the Babylonian connections of giants.
Well, you know what's interesting, Todd? Even in Egypt, they had this character called Set. And he was pretty much Satan for them. And he was actually represented by a giant snake.
That was his symbol?
Yeah.
Because I've seen pictures of Set, and yeah, he's has a Doberman head almost.
Yeah, and that's very true. And the thing with a lot of these gods, they'd be depicted in several different ways, but usually there's a few of them that they would kind of stick to.
And you know, that's of interest, Daniel. But if you look back through time, you know, Jesus, there's been about 20 different versions of Jesus that existed before he was called Jesus, that go back about 5,000 years, where that same mythology is played out. No disrespect to Jesus, but if you read Fraser's book, The Golden Bough, it goes through at least 20 religions before Jesus, Christianity, that have the exact same mythos.
Yeah, totally. I absolutely agree with that. There is the stuff from Phrygia, the guys that wear those poofy hats. They think there's some kind of connection to mushrooms, and then of course you have Horus from the Egyptian religion / mythology. But I do think that there's something to be said about, once again, these concepts or archetypes, these stories, these spiritual concepts playing themselves out in any time, any place. They just seem to keep coming back, and there's got to be a reason for that. There's something to figure out here.
Well, I got to work in. Your last show was one of the most intense shows I think I've heard you do. Ole was so intense. He's a very intense guest. His information about them playing the same effects over and over. They're flying these people around that pull off the false flag operations that change our society. That was an intense show, Daniel.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that if somebody would make a really good movie about Martin Luther King and show what really happened, that he was basically just blasted away by the shadow government. I think if somebody would do that, hint, hint, out there, hint, hint, if somebody would do that, then I think it would turn a lot of heads.
They've already made that movie, dude. And
oh, they did?
Martin Luther King's family, they took the case to court, and James Earl Ray was exonerated in a second trial, and they apologized. They said, "We're sorry, James Earl Ray, the family of Martin Luther King," because they did the case in civil court, and it turned out that the government was responsible for killing him. That was the ruling they found. It was pretty potent.
Yeah, it's funny because if you were to go on Wikipedia and read about that, it'll say the same thing, but it'll paint a very different picture.
Yeah, they're famous at schmoozing over their version of events. Some of us remember history, though. Some of us remember what happened. And that's why they have such a hard time schmoozing over history with the older generation, like me, yeah. But, and there's so many good things to talk about. There was, he was going into Lucifer, and everyone's talking about Lucifer. Oh, the serpents. You want to talk about serpents. The earliest religion on the face of the planet that is recorded in history books goes back 5,000 years, and it's the Order of the Serpent. Their symbol was a serpent. They worshiped serpents. Moses talked about them in the Old Testament.
Yeah, in fact, the original snake in the Garden of Eden was a upright walking serpent called Nakash.
And so you wonder if they're talking about a literal snake that's telling them what to do, or the person operating from the part of the brain called the medulla oblongata, the serpent part of our brains. Tool made songs talking about different parts of the brain. I think they might have made one called medulla oblongata. But,
yeah, that's I think Carl Sagan, he wrote a very famous book, and he kind of went into that whole reptilian brain thing. I believe it was called The Dragons of Eden.
Carl Sagan?
Yeah, Carl Sagan.
Very boring person.
You would think, but he did write this book And this book is actually like one of the major things in the reptilian sort of thing.
Concept that there's a part of our brain that controls our thoughts and understandings. The creepiest thing I ever heard, Daniel, was they were talking about how elderly care workers report when people start to go into Alzheimer's. Sometimes they get really mean because their brain starts to deteriorate on top, and the reptilian part of their brain starts to come out. And they sound just like a possessed person. Yeah, they start cussing at the care worker, you know. Or they're speaking in tongues, or people that never swore, old people, are just cussing this person out for no reason. Because everything they didn't want to say, they're suddenly spewing out, you know.
I can explain that, Todd. I can explain that to you. So, okay, so you are touching on something here, and I think the problem with you is you make a lot of discrepancies, and you separate things like anything that has to do with the Christian religion, you just hate it. Like you have your goggles on, and if something good comes through that pipeline, you can't see it at all because you're so biased against it. And that's fine. We're all biased against something. This is an attack on you.
I don't hate it. I just see it through a lens.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. So you see it through a lens, and that's fine. That's not what I'm about to talk about. I'm just laying the groundwork. But the thing is that there is something here where the beast inside of man is being brought forth, the lower nature, the evil, the darkness, the part of man that comes from the pit. It's being brought to the surface, and that reptilian part of the brain is all very much part of this. That's a scientific way of looking at it without saying, oh, it's Satan, it's Lucifer, it's the devil, it's the force of evil. This is just a scientific way of looking at exactly what's going on. This reptilian part of the brain, it's becoming dominant more and more.
Well, let's say it doesn't leave you. It just has less sway at certain periods.
It's stupid, and it's lower, and it's all about survival. It has no spirituality. It has no higher functionality. The only way that this type of brain can become connected with the rest of the world is using technology, because it's closed itself off to the true psychic abilities of the human race.
It's cold-blooded, but guess what? It's the most basic function of survival. Let's not forget birds are reptiles, and they survived by having a bird's eye view. So before you throw out the reptilian part of the brain as all bad, realize it's a survival mechanism that's part of our evolution.
It is. I totally agree with that. In fact, I would take it a step further, and I would say that if you were to take a type of drug, like a psychedelic drug that is designed to tear down the ego and make you feel this state of bliss and, oh, everything is so great, this is so awesome, but what's going to happen if you're tripping on some drug like that and then some people just walk in your house and take your couch and your TV and everything that you own?
Well, you're going to sit there and go, I don't have a couch and a TV and I don't own it anymore. I mean, of course that's what's going to happen.
And you're also going to say, I should have snapped out of it. What am I doing having these hippie ideas when I should have been protecting my stuff?
Well, I don't know about those hippie ideas because it's a pretty crazy topic you got us off onto. How'd you get us over there?
I don't know, Todd. This is End of Days Radio, and we go deep down into the rabbit's hole.
There's some really cool stuff we were going to talk about before he took us over people stealing our couch.
Well, no. You got to think about this, though, Todd, because I don't mean to insult hippies. I'm not attacking the hippies. They're fine. They're a great part of our conscious evolution. But what I'm saying is that too much of that mentality, next thing you know, you're not fighting for your survival. You have to have that too. Oh. You have to master the entire soft. You got to have the 666 and you got to have the 777.
Yeah, that's what the hippies did. Was they just basically said peace, love, man, and then the military industrial complex marched over the top of their heads. Yeah, that's where we're at. You got to be real.
Exactly.
You remember when Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young did that song, Forgetting Ohio, 10 soldiers in, Nixon's coming, we're finally on our own. You remember that song, Ohio, by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young?
Oh, yeah, good song.
Yeah, it was about the Kent State Massacre, where the National Guard fired on student protesters, and that set off the protest for real. When people saw on TV that somebody accidentally started shooting protesters on American soil, our own people were shooting our own people, that really set all the turmoil that was going off at the end of the 60s and the 70s and Martin Luther King and all that.
You know, it's sad. It's sad because people forget about stuff like that, and they don't teach it at school either.
That's when shit started to turn around, because when people saw that they shot our own protesters, and then Vietnam was a lie, and Nixon was not a crook, but he was a crook. Man, our whole society turned. So then, Daniel, they pretended that they were going to look into it. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to get rid of Nixon, and all the corruption will go out. They pretended, right?
Uh-huh.
That it was going to get better. It was just a ruse. The flower children kind of... So then we went into the 80s and then Reagan.
They do that all the time. They still do that. Now people think, if Trump didn't get elected and Hillary would have got elected, things would be great. We would all be happy right now. We'd all be running naked through the forest and just enjoying the fruits of the earth. And there'd be no problems.
Wouldn't that be nice? They let you live like an adult. Treated you like an adult. The gods are hungry, Daniel, and they require blood.
Well, they got to get everybody angry about something or another so they can keep everybody arguing on Twitter all day and keep us from actually figuring out what's going on in the Middle East or what's going on in the underground bunkers or what's going on in your neighbor's basement.
Well, is there any news stories?
Yeah, of course. Let's see what we got here.
I'll go down let me get down here by the portal and you read me the news story.
Oh, the portal.
Yeah, the portal. Your guest got me like, I better go down by the portal because he's talking about the portals.
You're freaking me out, Todd. You got CERN going on.
Kind of weird like that.
You got CERN going on in your basement.
I do. I don't even know how it happened. It's just a philosophical concept. I just, said, let's kind of sensed it. Maybe there's something down there. Went down there. Other people sensed it. Shit's come through. I got people that won't come over anymore because of the portal. And then others that love it. It's really weird. But tell me a news story.
This isn't some kind
down by the portal now. It's opening.
Todd, this isn't some kind of Satan portal, is it?
Oh, hell no. I'm a non-Satanist.
Okay, just checking.
Non-Satanist. No, I'm not. I'm not a Satanist. I'm not a non-Satanist. I'm not a Satanist.
Okay, as long as the portal is benign.
The portal is just a freaking thing that opens between the whatever it is. Don't know what it is.
We're not going to have some reptilians coming through that damn thing, are we?
Different shit comes through. Lots of inspiration at times. I swear a few musicians came through, like Kurt Cobain one night and then David Bowie once or twice shortly after.
Holy crap, I'd rather have a reptilian than David Bowie come through. That guy's scary.
It was really strange. The reptilians, I don't see those. Owl, that's about the closest I get to a reptilian.
You had an owl come through?
No, owl's about as close as I get to a reptilian. I haven't seen any reptilians.
Oh, owl.
Yeah, owl.
Speaking of owl, he's scheduled to come on this program on April 11th at 7:30 Pacific Standard Time.
That's going to be probably your best program of all time. Sorry to say it.
Yeah. Todd, you're very excited about this.
Oh, I'm so excited because maybe you can get him to talk about his reptilian DNA. You go into detail about it.
All right. I mean, I'm gonna really hear him out this time. We're gonna just keep it going. I'm not gonna interrupt. I'm not gonna argue anything he's talking about. I'm just gonna let him go. We're gonna find out what really makes this guy tick.
I would argue. I would say, wait a minute. If something don't sound right, question him. It'll follow a line. He doesn't veer. He's not. Ask him about him being Jesus.
Okay, let's do it. Like I said, I want to hear the bulk of it. I want to hear all the crazy stuff that goes on next to the portal in the basement.
Well, he comes over once in a while. Al's not here all the time. About maybe once a month he'll stop in and play guitar because he plays such a mean guitar. He's my buddy for many years, but I love him because he's a musician. So that's going to be one of your best shows, Daniel. I love that. Drill them on the reptiles. Drill them on ancient knowledge, especially anything to do with the Druids. It should be incredible.
All right, Todd. This story comes from abc.net.au. It says that somebody claims that Wizard of Oz munchkins molested Judy Garland. No, I'm sorry. Claims that Wizard of Oz munchkin molested Judy Garland deserve a response. So it turns out... Okay, this one I was prepared for. So it turns out that Judy Garland was actually sexually assaulted by some of the little people she was working with on the set of Wizard of Oz. Somebody claims.
Have you ever seen that movie, The Wizard of Oz?
Oh, yeah, that's a staple. Everyone's seen that one.
Is that outfit not just kind of wow? So you got those little people running around. They're shorter than, they're short.
Well, the guy that supposedly did it, he was one of the Lollipop Guild.
Yeah.
The little guys with the weird hair.
He handed her the lollipop in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Apparently he was, or a bunch of them were sticking their hands up her skirt.
Yowza. Oh. That's horrible.
Yeah. The source is dubious, it looks like. And...
No, it's not dubious. It's her husband.
It is?
It said she told her that. Yeah, her husband.
That came from her husband.
Yeah, she said now that she's gone and passed away, I'm going to tell what she said. And she told me those little midgets, they were drunk every night and putting their hands up my skirt on, said every
Oh my God! No, I didn't know that. I didn't know it was her husband. That's really disturbing.
Yeah, their hands were so short that they could get right to the thing, and
oh my God!
horrible. Sounds like.
Okay, yeah, I found it. I found it. I'm sorry. I was looking for it. It says that the actress's late husband, Sid Luft, in a re-released book, Judy and I, reportedly writes, they'd make Judy's life miserable on set by putting their hands under her dress. Okay, this is no bullshit. This actually happened.
They're the lollipop kids.
Holy crap!
Oh,
so they're running around in their little costumes, sticking their hands up her dress. That's terrible. Sick.
Sounds like a porno from the 70s.
They've made porn movies based on the Wizard of Oz, and it wasn't this bad. This is some sick midget, nasty, weird. Oh my God!
What was really going on was worse than the fantasy. Yeah. Holy shit!
Holy shit!
She had to live with that.
Oh.
Ooh. Every time she saw the movie or heard the song, oh God, no!
And I'm looking at this picture of her, and her eyes, they just look so bugged out, and she looks so scared. They're probably pumping her full of methamphetamines.
Every time she'd bend over, the midget beat her. I just teased him. I don't know what was going on there. I don't know about those midgets.
Oh my Lord!
Have
you ever heard the thing where if you look at the background during one of the scenes of The Wizard of Oz, you can see one of the midgets hanging himself, or Munchkins? I'm sorry.
Hanging himself?
Yeah, it turned out to be an urban legend, but there was this scene in Wizard of Oz. If you watch the background carefully, you could see this shadowy figure of a dwarf climb up this ladder, and then he hangs himself, and then you see his body just swinging.
That's too weird. What do you make of it?
Well, they investigated, and they found out it was a bird.
Huh.
Yeah, pretty unexciting, but who knows? That could be a lie to cover up the truth. It might have been one of these perverted drunk ones.
Right on.
Well, okay. How about the one? How about the one where you could play Pink Floyd, "Dark Side of the Moon," and play The Wizard of Oz, and it matches up perfectly?
Yeah, I've heard that. There's, Mandela effect. No, maybe no. I mean, it matches perfectly. I don't think. Maybe they did make the album to fit with Wizard of Oz, but doesn't that sound like a lot of...
Let's, you know what, Todd? Let's forget the news for a second. Let's do something else.
Yeah.
Let's read a listener. Let's read a letter from a listener, and then you and I can comment on it.
Sounds cool.
Okay. This is a letter, an email from a guy named David Sandoz. He says, "Dear End of Days Radio, your show is good, but it would be better if you added fake 1940s style commercials."
That's it?
Yeah, I don't know. Fake 1940s commercials?
Well, what does there wasn't any, radio was only coming around in like, what kind of commercials are going on?
Everybody use Daniel's special butt cleaner. I don't know.
Get a really cheap microphone. Hey, buy some soap.
That's not the worst idea. That sounds kind of cool. Just like an old microphone that makes me sound like shit. Like makes me sound like I'm in the 1940s.
You could do a rebroadcast of War of the Worlds. Oh my God, it's horrible.
I can do this. I can do this. All of us are in here. Hello. Shut up. Stop talking to me. What's going on in here? I'm so scared. Help me.
Daniel, where are you?
Help me. Todd.
Do like a Brady Bunch episode. Daniel, are you in the cave? Did you fall down the well? Oh, I love that.
I'm in the well. Help me, Todd. Go get my parents.
Kids fall in wells all the time around here because there's lots of open pits.
Help me.
It's horrible. Daniel, we're gonna get some rescue. I'll get Lassie.
Oh my! Such fun we have here on End of Days Radio.
It's so fun. It's so fun. We get all serious and esoteric and semi-intellectual on occasion, and then we have some fun.
I think we're just being us.
Yeah, it's you know.
I'm being Daniel and Todd's being Todd, and it just works. What can I say?
Well, you know, it's just we're just regular people. I'm not on a book tour schedule. I don't think you are either.
I am a lunatic.
You are a lunatic. I was parking in the parking lot, you know, where I work. I'm setting tile. You know, I'm a tile setter. And we're doing the big old research center up at the University of Utah where they do all these, have labs and people with neurological symptoms are coming in and autistic people, children. I'm doing the lobby. I'm setting tile and I pull in and I park in a spot that says reserved for patients only. And I get out, I get ready to go to work, and this lady comes out, kind of heavy set, half heavy set, and goes, "Would you mind not parking there? This is reserved for patients only, and they're disabilitated. They have problems. You're trying to get in the front door." And I'm like, no problem. I'm smiling, you know. But she's like, "You're the third person I told today don't park in that spot because these people have a hard time getting to the front door."
She's got a
point. I'm like, no problem. I will move. But I almost said, "I'm crazy. Does that count?" Because the whole building's full of people that are coming in because they have some problems.
I don't think you're crazy, Todd.
No, I bet it's a joke.
If you were crazy, you would not
all.
be able to take care of yourself. You'd be living on the streets.
One of those guys, yeah. No, on occasion I let the reptilian brain just sort of see if you're powerful enough, you can channel those reptilian energies and broadcast them out through the reason part of your brain.
You can contact
that ability.
Todd, if you want to, you can contact the reptilians. I just don't recommend it.
Well, if you're going to contact some being or God or something, why would you contact them? Wouldn't you contact something more incredible, like Shiva or
If you really want it to happen and you really have that intent and you broadcast it out there and you really, in your heart, want it to happen, then they will come to you.
Yeah, you can invoke beings, for sure.
Yeah.
Look around you. People are walking around in the street believing that this God and that God is right there, and it's right there in my heart.
Well,
right on.
I mean, they'll actually show up.
Oh, they will show up. Yeah. There's methods to make them manifest.
Well, first what happens is you start feeling their energy, and you just know it's them. It has this certain feel to it, like this certain vibration. You could just feel it, and then you start seeing this eye. You see this eye in your mind's eye, and you start seeing it in your mind's eye all the time, and that's how you know you're in contact with them.
Magicians are taught to do a little research and study the god or goddess or demon and try to see them, all their characteristics. It helps to manifest them if you actually study their belief systems and that's what magicians are taught. But and invoking is a very powerful a thing that makes you realize, wow, you can invoke these gods and demons according to magical lore.
Yeah, I think it's entirely possible, and I also think that we all do it every day. Like, say I'm sitting on my couch and I'm looking at my old CDs and I see a picture of Jimi Hendrix. Well, I just evoked the god of guitar.
Kind of, but it has a more powerful expression, though. It can be a more powerful expression than just looking at your CD and thinking about him. Sometimes it can actually manifest through, I believe, the current of energy of what he was promoting in the sound.
Let me ask you something, Todd.
Yeah.
So, tell me if you think this is a cool idea. So, this new thing I've been noticing, this new trend, it's their podcasts. You like podcasts, right?
Yeah.
Well,
I love all I do is listen to those.
Yeah, me too. I love podcasts. But these are in-character podcasts where the people on the show, they actually pretend to be characters in some freaking fantasy world, and they role play on the show. It's almost like the old Dick Tracy radio shows or something like that.
Yes, they're making up fictional stories and they're reading them as the podcast. They're enacting the plays. Yeah, I've heard those. I got...
What?
There was something missing, Daniel. I could get into old radio broadcasts. As a kid, when there was just radio, there was a show called... it was called... I can't remember. It was on AM radio.
Superman?
No, it was Mystery Theater.
Oh, I heard
where they
of that.
read shows and everybody got into the parts and they'd play the creaking door would open every time the show would start. E.G. Marshall, one of the most famous actors and voices of a generation or two ago, was the narrator, and it was Mystery Theater or something like that. It was killer. It was incredible.
All right, Todd. So check this out. Next week, me and you, let's do it. Let's do our own cop show.
Cop show?
Yeah, we'll do it like old school radio.
Oh, well, cop show.
Oh, it doesn't have to be a cop show. We can do anything. We can do Superman, or we can do our own thing entirely. We can be paranormal investigators.
Cool. We can do voices. I had a big piece of tin that sounds just like lightning if you hit it right.
Perfect. We can do it on...
Yeah, I'm into sound effects. I'm not the Wolfman or anything like that, but...
We can do it on Halloween. We'll do a scary story.
Dude, that'd be so cool. Put together some weird-ass scary story. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, and
how you do that?
Yeah.
For sure.
Let's do it. Okay, Todd, I've had you on for about...
Cool.
I've had you on a long time.
Before I let you go, introduce a new segment called Daniel's Weird Theater, where it's a story.
Whoa! Hello, children. Welcome to Daniel's Weird Theater. Whoa!
Little small segment at the end of the show.
I like it. Let's do it.
Horror story. You know what my wife loves the most, Daniel? She listens to podcasts nonstop. Not yours, but that's nothing against you. She has different tastes. But she likes the stories. She likes the ghost stories, the spooky made-up stories. If they put a little theater in the background, weird sound effects, she loves that. Listen to a story. That's a great idea, Daniel.
Yeah.
I like that. All right. All right, I will let you go, my man, but fantastic show. Hope that I didn't keep you too long. I had a bunch of other shit I was going to say and didn't. Probably a good idea.
Well, maybe this Halloween we can reenact Dracula. We'll do Dracula. Or maybe Frankenstein.
I have that book, Dracula and Frankenstein.
Or Pumpkinhead.
There you go. Let's do Lovecraft stories.
We can do anything. That's what we always do. Anything.
Totally. But no, I appreciate your time, Daniel, and fantastic show, my man. Thanks, buddy.
All right. I'll talk to you later, Todd.
Rock on, my man.
Okay, that was Todd the Bod calling in from the salty state of Utah. Interesting talking to him. He has some very interesting views. Always fun to talk to old Todd. He does seem to get a little angry, though, whenever anybody talks about the devil. Do you think it's because the devil is watching over his shoulder? I'm just joking, Todd. Oh my. So much to talk about, so little time left. I think that this has been a good show. I love when it's off the cuff, just like tonight, when we just freestyle and jibber jabber and kind of improvise as we go. There's a time for this, there's a time for that. There's a time for more structure and order, and there's a time for chaos. I think that whole thing with the in-character podcast is pretty cool, though. I think that something like that would be interesting, but I have to wonder, is this such an extreme niche that it's going to be hard to find an audience and maintain it, or is it just so fun to do that you just do it? Because that's what I'm doing. I mean, I'm kind of just doing what I want to do. I don't really profit off of this show at all, as many of you know. I just do it because it comes naturally. It's what I feel like I should be doing. That's the best way that I could put it. This show's completely free. It'll always be free here on planet Earth, free to you, free to me. I don't pretend that it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it's free, right? And when you get something for free, it doesn't matter if it's not the best thing ever because it's free. So I think this show has an advantage on many other shows. Whether you like this show or whether it's your cup of tea or not, it's completely free. And you're free to listen and you're free to not listen at any time. And there's plenty of content here and plenty of interesting stuff for you to hear. So I'm not sure why you would not listen, to be quite honest. But I know that it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I will promise that it will always be everybody's cup of free. Because I don't believe in charging for something like this. We're supposed to be waking people up. We're supposed to be fighting the man. This is the resistance, baby. That's an underground movement dedicated to something or another, to spread the ideals of some kind and create a lot of change. And we're going to do it, damn it. We're going to do it right now. There's no time. There's no time for doubt anymore. We know this stuff is real. We know that we are screwed. And if you can't see that, then pretty soon it's going to be too late for you. So please, look at this stuff. Follow the links. Pretty soon you're not even going to be able to do that because the internet is going extinct. They're actually going to censor everything on the internet. They've got us all on social media. They've got us all on the same platforms. Now they just have to edit those platforms. And it's over. Why do you think there's an endofdaysradio.com? Why do you think endofdaysradio.com is on a server that I own? Do you understand what I'm saying? This is a completely isolated free enterprise. It cannot be edited. I'm not going to depend on any other outlets. networks. Networks have always been a disaster. I've never wanted to be a part of any networks. There were times when I found myself in that position due to bad moves in the past that were not really my moves. But it's always been a bad idea, and it always will be. You don't need anybody. All of you guys out there that have your own shows, you don't need anybody. That's what I really want you to know more than anything else, is that you do not need anybody. You do not need to depend on a network. You do not need to get anybody's approval. You can do it all yourself nowadays. And that's the way you got to do it if you really want to do it. And I can show you how. I can show you the door, but you got to walk through. But if you're willing to put in the time, then I'm willing to put in the time too. I'm kind of bummed. I found out they're not going to make any more Justice League movies. Apparently, they didn't do that well, especially compared to their Marvel counterparts. Excuse me, I need a sip of the dew. Oh my god, so delicious. The staple of this podcast, or show, whatever it is. Where the hell was I? So, the DC Universe shows, they are all being canceled. They're all being just swept from the board because they're not as popular as their Marvel counterparts. They had bad reviews, a lot of rottens on Rotten Tomatoes. And the movies, they pretty much failed. They did not get over on a wide scale. They did not connect with audiences. People weren't into them. They were like, oh, cool, that's so awesome. Guess what happened? People were like that with the Avengers, with the Marvel movies. Black Panther just did phenomenal. And that's Disney making all those movies. They know what they're doing. They pump a lot of money into their projects, great special effects, etc., etc. Fantastic. But as a comic book fan, as somebody that loves movies, I'm bummed about this. I wanted to see, not to spoil the movie for anybody, but they showed a character called Deathstroke at the end. And let me tell you, you guys that aren't into comics and don't know what I'm talking about, Deathstroke is a fucking badass. Deathstroke is a fucking badass. You guys know Deadpool? Well, he's based on Deathstroke. In fact, Deadpool is a parody. He's a caricature of Deathstroke. And he has a comedic spin on him, and he has become his own character. But he still comes from Deathstroke. Deathstroke is a badass. Go on Wikipedia, go on Google, read about him, watch videos on YouTube about Deathstroke, read the comics if you can get a hold of them. Trust me, this guy is a badass. And he should be every bit as popular as all those other superheroes. For those of you that care anyway, I'm sorry to those that I'm boring the shit out of with this strange talk of comic book characters. But the reason why I'm talking about it is because I'm bummed. They were going to have Deathstroke in the new Justice League movie, and now they're not. And I'm so bummed about that. I'm so bummed about that. I'm really mortified because they were going to make another Justice League movie, and it was probably going to have Darkseid in it too. And that was the big thing that I was hoping would be in this Justice League movie. And I'm not gonna bore the shit out of you guys talking about comic books all night, but trust me when I say likewise, this guy Darkseid, however you say his name, he's a badass too. And you should learn about him as well. Let's just put it that way. Very entertaining stuff, very cool stuff. And the fact that we're not going to see these stories play out on the big screen is extremely depressing to me. But I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to talk about this nerdy shit forever. I know that it pisses some of you off. And then some of you absolutely love it. So shout out to you guys. Yeah, nerd high five. Okay. So another thing that I wanted to talk about, we're joking around a lot tonight. I hope nobody's offended. I joke around. Don't take me seriously. I'm just talking smack and just being playful and joking around. I hope nobody actually takes my opinions too seriously where they're going to jump off a bridge because I said something that they don't like. Holy shit, what was that? I just heard a...
Thinking about suicide, you may want to speak with someone at the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. They're at 1-800-273-8255. Shall I call them for you?
Holy crap, did you guys hear that? Did that all play out just now? I just, freaked out and completely lost my shit. So, I said something about jumping from a bridge, and then frickin' Siri started talking to me. Holy shit. What the hell? I almost had a heart attack just now. I was like, oh my god, somebody's fucking with my mind. Somebody's in the room. Who's doing this? I'm being hacked. And I just freaked out. And then I saw my phone, and I looked over at it, and it was on, and it was talking about, oh my god. Oh. My heart hurts. Holy shit. Imagine you're sitting here, and you think that you're on air, you are on air, and then you start hearing this voice, and it's talking about suicide. Holy crap, what is that, a demon? Oh my god. I thought that Todd's portal had shifted into my garage. For a second there. Whew. Oh my god. Oh, Jesus. Okay, we gotta get back on track here. This is derailing the entire broadcast. That little mishap. There was something about that. I mean, hey, I don't mean to sound paranoid or crazy, in quotes, but I swear there was something almost supernatural or paranormal about that just now. And if not, it is scary that your smartphone is listening to you and listening to you talk about suicide and picking up on certain keywords from afar. And I can't help but wonder if that happened purposefully in some way. It was very strange and very scary and came out of nowhere. And I'm amazed at the technology. 2, I'm a little freaked out the way that synchronistically happened. 3, I'm not suicidal, so I don't know why that would come on. And also, I'm scared because what if you say something and it's sending messages to somebody, right? That's not cool. Just shows the surveillance and the technology, et cetera, et cetera. Whew, I'm a little shaken up. Why does weird stuff like that happen on this show? Man, probably the most paranormal thing that's happened on air was years ago when we had that channeler on. I think her name was Audrey, the light language channeler, or something like that. And this was years ago. And she was channeling for us live on air. And I actually, when she was doing it, I felt something in the room, like this electrical sensation. And all of a sudden she goes, you guys, you feel us? We're there with you. Right when I was feeling it. So that freaked me out. Definitely something paranormal going on there. I mean, I can't prove it in quotations, but obviously. And I know that the show's probably been shut down 2 to 4 times. I'm sure there's times when it actually was happening and other times when it probably was just a coincidence. But I know it's happened. For sure. And I'm just talking about stuff that's happened to me while I'm on air. I've had plenty of paranormal experiences off air my whole life. Stuff that if I talked about, I would lose what tiny sliver of credibility that I could ever dream to have. And I just don't talk about it on air because it's too crazy to the point where it's embarrassing and I wouldn't expect you to ever believe it. But believe me, some crazy shit has happened to me, and that's probably why I am the way that I am. I'm not going to say that I'm afraid to talk about it because I'm really not. I could, but I feel it's better to just release it in small doses. I've given my entire UFO experience on air. I think that's something. I think that sharing that, something that really happened to me, isn't any bullshit. I think that that's very brave of me. Pat self on back. And I think that any of you guys out there that come on this show who are having experiences that are being gang stalked, perhaps, that are seeing UFOs, that are meeting with reptilians in the dark, even if you're doing something very dark and you're summoning the devil himself, I have no problem having you on this program. We've talked to the light, we've talked to the dark. I certainly don't discriminate. We've had people from the right-handed path. We've had people from the left-handed path. We've had right-wingers, left-wingers. We've had old people, young people, blacks, whites, Hispanics, Asians, even some Latinos. Who knows? We may have even had a reptilian on the program and not even realized. It's possible. As I'm sure many of you are aware, there was a war going on between Parkland shooting survivor David Hogg, who is a big name in the media these days, and Laura Ingraham, who is a Fox News broadcaster of some type or another. I'm sorry, I'm not terribly familiar with the whole thing. But apparently this kid has a lot of power now, and he can get people fired from their jobs. And upon seeing this, I'm immediately disgusted that this skinny little freak of nature with his alien freaking face has all of these terrible things to say about somebody, yet is supposed to be about freedom of expression. I can't help but find that very disturbing, that somebody who is pretty much a child would have the power to get somebody fired from their job. That really leads me to think that this is no mere child, and this kid is indeed some sort of actor. Perhaps he is... Oh, I'm getting a warning to shut up, to not talk about this. Why? It seems innocent. Okay. So, sorry everybody. I got word from a higher power. They're telling me not to talk about this. I don't know why. This show is not censored at all. I promise you. But apparently this is dangerous to the timeline. So if I avoid this topic in the here and now, we'll do okay. I do apologize for those of you out there that wanted me to talk about this, but apparently I have to move on. I do think that Trump is right about a lot of the stuff he's been saying about the FBI. I mean, we know that they were involved in the assassination of JFK, for one thing. I think that alone, and a lot of the stuff that's come out due to the Freedom of Information Act, I really think that the organization needs to be under some sort of discipline. I think that that would be completely appropriate right now, based on their track record. And they should definitely be disbanded and possibly be even shut down. I think we should start anew organization, and you can call it the FBO or the FBA, but the name of the FBI, in my opinion, is incredibly tarnished. It's a name that we associate with secrecy and conspiracy, and there's really no reason why we need to have it. I understand that it's a part of our country and a part of our government and part of our system, but I don't think it would really hurt to replace it with a different organization that has a little bit more transparency as well as checks and balances. These organizations, mainly the ones I can think of, are the FBI, the CIA, maybe the NSA. They seem to have too much power on their own. Doesn't it seem that way? Like it's always seemed that way because the secrecy and the intelligence, it gives them a right to keep things really close to heart and not reveal them to the rest of the public. I don't think that's right. I totally think they should disband the FBI and change it to maybe the FBO. I think that would be entirely appropriate. I think a lot of things. This movie, Ready Player One, is doing very good. Steven Spielberg. There's been a lot of talk of this movie being some sort of transhumanist plotline agenda. My phone better not come on again. I'm getting freaked out. I shouldn't have to feel this way. I should not have to feel like the damn thing is alive. I should not feel that way. I mean, when your phone is talking to you about suicide and it's on a live broadcast and it's completely on accident, you can't help but get freaked out, especially because of the nature of the show. You guys don't think that was some kind of veiled threat, do you? Pretty creepy. I don't even know why I'm entertaining these thoughts. These paranoid thoughts can be a demon upon themselves, for sure. Did you guys know that Vladimir Putin believes in reptilians? This source is very dubious. And this time it's really dubious, not like when we were talking to Todd back there. This is just from some completely unknown source, but the claim is that Vladimir Putin had a secret meeting where he privately disclosed that there is an ancient Babylonian cult that is in control of the world, and they've tried to recruit him, and they're afraid of him. And he said that they are dragons, or he called somebody a dragon. He referenced something to the fact that they're reptilians or they're snakes or associated with snakes. Probably a fake news story. I mean, a lot of this stuff gets floated around. It could be disinfo. Who knows? It could be true, though. Who's to say that somebody like him is not in the know about this sort of subject matter? It seems like he would need to be. He has a lot of power. I'm sure he knows what's going on. I'm sure he plays into the structure of the world somehow. He must know. I think Trump probably does too. Well, that's what Alex Jones was claiming during the election. He was saying, oh, Trump knows about all this stuff, but he can't talk about it. He knows about it all, but he can't talk about it. It makes sense. I mean, he wants to be president and he wants to stay president. He's not going to talk about crazy stuff. But maybe behind closed doors, he is kind of in the know. How could you not be once you've reached a certain level of society? Especially if you've actually become the president. I mean, you got to know how it works. Didn't Obama give a speech in front of the CFR or Trilateral Commission or something like that? There you go. I'm sure he knows what's up. Why would he even be there or know about it? Especially giving a speech there. There's a lot of deception at play. But know that these councils, they completely control our government as well as our media. We are completely controlled by them. Make no mistake about it. And these councils are part of the structure that controls the world. These Illuminati families, we talked about it earlier with our guest. We talk about it a lot, almost every show. And maybe we should take a break. Maybe we should have another comedy month. Maybe we should do another magic month. That would be fun. But we always seem to come full circle and go back to the same thing. This Illuminati. These magicians hiding behind the curtain, pulling the wool over our eyes. And the big question always is, what is at the top of the pyramid? Is it a giant eyeball? Is it the devil? Is it aliens? Is it the evil inside of man? Is it simply the mystery and the light needs to spread upon the darkness? Is that all there is? It's really hard to say. One thing that I've learned is psychology is bullshit. At least in the sense that you can go sit down next to some therapist and they're going to figure you out and fix you. All they're going to do is pull open old wounds and charge you money to put band-aids on them. I think what's really powerful is that what they call shadow work, where you go inside yourself and you face the darkness within. I'll take that stuff over psychiatry any day. I think it'll do you a lot more good. Shadow work. Delving deep into the darkness to face the enemy within. That's how you gotta do it. I'm telling you. It works. It works better than any of that foo-foo scientific stuff anyways. I do have another letter from a listener. This is from Ephraim. He says, "Hello, end of days. What is the horniest you have ever been, and what did you do about it? Question mark. Ephraim, what is wrong with you, my friend? Why must you be so crude and bestial? Don't you know that you are giving in to that reptilian part of your brain? Why must you embrace the darkness, my friend? Why must you say these things to me, your friend Daniel? How can you be so crude on this holiest of holy shows, this end of days radio? How could you do this to us, Ephraim? I don't know. Probably when I was a teenager. Probably 16. I am guessing. I mean, it had to be back then, right? Because your hormones are raging. So somewhere in that time period. And as far as what did I do about it, I did what most people that age would do about it. And it's as simple as that. I'm not going to freaking lay out some kind of sexual fantasy for you, you sick pervert. I don't know what you are calling into the show asking a question like that. Do I appear to you like some sort of phone sex operator? Oh, Lord. Okay. What have we got left? You know, we've been going for a good while. I think we've pretty much covered everything that I wanted to cover. We've stayed on air for a good 3.5 hours. And yeah, I know a lot of it was just him and hawing around, but I think we had a good time. I feel satisfied. I think that there's a lot of directions the show can go in. And sometimes it's better to keep things tight. Sometimes it's better to just kind of improvise as you go. I was prepared tonight, of course. I was prepared for our guest. And I had plenty of content to talk about. But we kind of went off track, especially when I had old Todd on the line. And I had a lot of fun doing that. I think that it's fun just letting things turn into anything. And it doesn't always have to be paranormal, does it? That's something that we are learning here on End of Days. This will always be a show that explores the darkness and a show where we journey down the rabbit hole. But it's okay to lighten things up every now and then. The show with comedian Monica Nevi is doing great. The reviews are awesome. There's been many views, many downloads, and due to the incredibly positive response of that, I do believe that I'm going to continue the trend of having stand-up comedians on the show. Yay, applause. Yay, pat self on back, applause. But I'm patting myself on the back. I think that this is going to be great for the show. I think that when we lighten things up every now and then, it gives us a break. Deep breaths. We take a break. This keeps us from going insane and becoming paranoid and becoming consumed by the darkness that we are exploring here. And when we keep things fun and light, it gives us power to face the darkness. That's how you got to do it. You got to keep your spirits up. That way, when you do have to finally do battle, you're really prepared for it because you're well rested. You know that you're going to win and you believe in yourself. So we're going to continue to party hard into the end times. I promise you guys, I will get some more comedians on the show. We're not going to do it all the time. Don't worry. Anybody out there thinking I'm going to change the show, that's not anything that's going to happen. Just every so often, we'll invite a comic on here. And it doesn't always have to be a comic either. We're going to just mix it up. We'll invite a comic, and then we'll invite a horse whisperer, and then we'll invite a poker player who hides knives and guns inside of his trench coat. Doc Holliday, yeah. Somebody like that. Somebody interested. There's so many different directions we could go in. Maybe somebody who's good with animals, like a Jack Hanna type of guy. And I do apologize to the Crocodile Hunter for the joke earlier in this episode that was very in bad taste. I apologize to the FCC for that remark. And I also apologize. Well, you know what? That's it. Fuck that. Why am I apologizing? We don't have any apologies on this program. We don't have time for this nonsense. You know what? If I really had balls, I would make a giant sign, and I'd go to the Capitol in Olympia, Washington, and I'd walk up the steps, and I'd hold up a big sign that says, "These people are crooks and criminals," and have somebody just film me there. That would be probably a good idea and a good way to promote this show. And I might just do that at some point. Or maybe I'll not do that and I'll come up with something far better and way smarter and something that won't get me in any sort of trouble or get anything thrown at me. There's an idea. But we'll see what happens. We're always mixing it up. Jeff Monson did something like that. You guys know about him, the MMA fighter that came from Washington. And he eventually moved over to Russia. Big, white, bald guy. He's a pretty good fighter. Kind of had a grappling sort of style, for those of you that are into that. Well, he went to the Capitol, and I think he vandalized it, like he spray painted on it. It's pretty disrespectful. But hats off to him. He had some balls to do that. He definitely got his message out there. I don't know if I agree with his message. I think he's some kind of anarchist, and he really likes the way they do things in Russia, and I don't really relate to that. But props to him for standing up to the man. There's a famous picture of him, like, facing down this group of police officers. Of course, I would never do anything of that nature. I'm too busy hiding in my garage, hiding from the Illuminati. Just me and my bottle of Mountain Dew and my guitar, fighting them with my Excalibur, fighting them with sound waves. The coolest transformer of all time is Soundwave. And it is truly disgusting that they did not utilize him better in those movies that they made. But there's plenty of time to talk about that in future episodes. And once again, for those of you that like End of Days Radio, go to endofdaysradio.com. I'm not going to do all the usual plugs tonight. I'm kind of tired. I did also work today. Yes, pat self on back again. Claps for self again. And I do need to also talk about our upcoming schedule. Oh, I'm tired. I'm sorry. I think I finally gassed. I've been going hard all day. Just going hard like a savage. Just fighting the fight and just fighting. I'm always fighting. I'm a hero. Everybody's hero, I swear. I'm always fighting. Ugh. But it's been a long war and I am tired and I must rest. So stay tuned next week. We will be talking to none other than Al. You guys know Al. He's been calling in for years. Due to popular demand, he will finally be joining the show as an actual guest. And I'm excited. And I know you guys are excited because it's going to be out of this freaking world. You guys out there that know Al and have listened to his calls, you know how down the rabbit hole we go with him. Deep. So, you longtime cult following End of Days Radio fans, I know you're out there because I hear you. You get so mad when I'm not on air for a while. And you guys, thank God for you because this show, it is growing so much and there's been so much content being released. And when I hear how much you miss this show, when it's not on for, a couple weeks or something like that, it just warms my heart because I know that you crave this show and you just eat it up. And I will give you as many, many great episodes as I can before I perish, before I finally get that Illuminati bullet. Let's hope that it doesn't leave me a brain-dead invalid. Let's hope it doesn't turn me into Rain Man or anything of that nature. Let's hope that it kills me so I don't have to live that way. But eventually that perhaps is my fate, and I have accepted it. I will go down a martyr, a hero for the resistance, as I move into the afterlife and become more powerful than ever before. I promise you, I will be there for you always. I will always be there for you. When you enter the world of dreams in the astral plane, there's always going to be a way to connect with Daniel. I heard that if you just leave little hooks in the timeline somewhere, it'll always be there. And if everybody wants to connect with you, they can. So let that be my message out there. To infinity and beyond. If anybody wishes to connect with me, then meet me on the astral plane. I will see you in the world of dreams, and we can hang out sometime, no matter what time or what dimension you're in. Remember, this is End of Days Radio. We are riding this black ship into the night. I am your ship's captain as we glide into the realms of broken dreams. From the broken ruins of Babylon, this is Daniel signing out.
Crack.
Fuck yeah.